Good afternoon, colleagues. Now the sitting is open, and I remind members that in order to be registered for the sitting, you will insert your badge when you take your seat and keep it inserted for at least 30 seconds. And you should also insert your badge in order to speak or vote. And to request the floor, please press the request button. I also remind members that the Assembly agreed on Monday that the speaking time in all debates today will be 3 minutes for spokespersons of political groups and 2 minutes for all other speakers. And the first item of business this afternoon is the debate on the report titled "The Functioning of Democratic Institutions in Serbia," presented by Ms. Victoria Tiplum and Mr. Yunus Emre on behalf of the Monitoring Committee. And in order to finish by 6:05 p.m., I will interrupt the list of speakers at about 5:25 p.m. to allow time for the reply and the vote. And we will begin with Ms. Tiplum and Mr. Emre, who are co-rapporteurs, and you have each 5 minutes now and 5 minutes in total to reply to the debate. I call Ms. Tiplum.
President and dear colleagues, since joining the Council of Europe in 2003, Serbia has been under the Assembly's monitoring procedure. Its last resolution, 1858, on the honouring of obligations and commitments by Serbia dates back from 2012, therefore more than 14 years ago. Several attempts to submit a new report by the Monitoring Committee were delayed due to a wide range of reasons. Therefore, we are happy to present our report to you today. We decided to prepare our report as a report on the functioning of democratic institutions instead of a regular monitoring report. We wanted to focus on issues related to the functioning of democracy, justice system, and public freedoms. We will now briefly summarize our findings. The Serbian political environment is characterized by significant polarization and by the ongoing tensions between President Aleksandar Vucic's government and the ruling majority led by the Serbian Progressive Party on one hand, and political opposition, student movement, and civil society on the other. The next parliamentary and presidential elections should normally take place in 2027. However, the President has not ruled out the possibility of organizing early elections by the end of this year. Since the 2000 general elections, all but 2 parliamentary elections in Serbia have been early elections. As regard electoral legislation, although a new electoral framework was adopted in February 2022, several long-standing OSCE ODIHR recommendations remain unaddressed, especially concerning misuse of public funds and the audit of voter lists. Moreover, on May 18th, Parliament adopted amendments to 4 electoral laws. Although the authorities state that these amendments aim at implementing the OSCE ODIHR recommendations, according to the opposition and civil society, the new laws incorporate only a fraction of them. There are now concerns mainly about possible use of phantom lists and misusing advantages granted to national minorities lists. For these reasons, the Monitoring Committee has just seized the Venice Commission for an opinion on these new laws. We also note with concern that after our visit to Belgrade, the 29th of March local elections that took place in 10 municipalities were marred by violence and irregularities, according to independent observers, including a delegation of the Congress of Local and Regional Authorities. As regard the 2024 tragedy in Novi Sad, which resulted in the deaths of 16 people and led to mass protests at the end of 24 and in 25, we note that it has had ongoing repercussions on political life and society in Serbia. The mass protests were led largely by students and civil society groups who demand new elections, transparency, accountability, and the eradication of corruption. From late 2025 to early 26, the nature of the protests shifted from constant daily mass marches to organized symbolic events and regional demonstrations. However, on May 23rd, up to 190,000 people took part in an anti-government protest in Belgrade to demand early elections. According to our finding and those of the Council of Europe Commissioner for Human Rights, who went to Serbia last May, the government's response to protests were quite violent. There were reports of police crackdowns, detentions, smear campaigns against protesters, ill treatment by police in custody, and infiltration and surveillance measures. Protesters also faced other forms of repression, such as difficulties finding jobs in the public sector and disciplinary sanctions. As regards accountability for the Novi Sad tragedy, although 13 people were detained in the immediate aftermath of the tragedy, including the former Minister of Transport, several have since been released pending trial. No convictions have yet been handed down. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tiblum, and now I call Mr. Imra.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will continue. Another topic which struck us is the alleged use of a sonic weapon during the mass demonstration in Belgrade on 15 March 2025, which caused mental and physical distress to numerous protesters. This case is now being examined by the European Court of Human Rights. The government denies using such a device, but has confirmed its accusation. Moreover, on June 19th, the Belgrade Higher Public Prosecutor's Office asked the police to identify and question every person who publicly spoke about the use of one sonic weapon in the framework of an investigation on incitement to violent overthrow of the constitutional order. In the past years, Serbia has taken important steps to reform its judiciary and prosecution services. In February 2022, amendments to the constitution were adopted, which were followed by the adoption of laws aimed at making the judiciary and prosecution service more independent and efficient. These laws were positively assessed by the Venice Commission. To implement the reform, the authorities have also adopted 36 bylaws. Unfortunately, despite this progress, on 28 January, the Parliament adopted, without public consultation, the so-called Mirdic laws, which amend the functioning of the judiciary and the prosecution service and might have a negative impact on ongoing corruption investigations, including the Novi Sad case. In its urgent opinion of last April, the Venice Commission criticized the majority of the new provisions. Consequently, the Ministry of Justice proposed to largely reverse the contested provisions. The authorities asked again for an opinion of the Venice Commission, which in its recent follow-up opinion concluded that the new draft provisions implement the majority of its April recommendations, 7 out of 9. We thus hope that the Serbian authorities will amend the Mirdic laws as soon as possible. Finally, we would like to focus on the state of freedom of expression and civic space. We came to the same findings as the Commissioner for Human Rights. We are concerned by the reprisals, slaps, and severe campaigns against journalists and independent media outlets. While Serbia has further aligned its media legislation with the European Union acquis and other European standards, it is also very worrying that the work of the Regulatory Authority for Electronic Media, REM, whose composition has not been entirely renewed since November 2024, is now totally blocked. We are also concerned about reprisals and other intimidation measures against NGOs, civil society activists, and human rights defenders, about the disruption of consultation processes between civil society and the authorities, and some legislative initiatives aimed at restricting the freedom of association. We also worried about revelations of surveillance of Serbian journalists and activists made by Amnesty International and the Balkan Investigative Reporting Network. To conclude, Serbian political life is characterized by significant polarization. The widespread protests that followed the tragedy in Novi Sad have led to the emergence of a new civil actor, the student movement. We are concerned about the frequent organization of early elections, lack of dialogue between the ruling majority and the opposition, risks to the independence of the judiciary, institutional control, corruption, threats to freedom of association and expression, and media capture. Therefore, we conclude that the Serbian authorities should make more sustained efforts to honor all obligations and commitments arising from their membership in the Council of Europe, and that the Assembly should continue its monitoring of this country. Our detailed recommendations are included in the draft resolution, and we hope the Assembly will support them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Emmerich, and I remind the Assembly that the speaking time is limited to 3 minutes for spokespersons for the political groups and 2 minutes for other members. And now in the debate I call first from the ECPA, Mr. Solt Nemeth. Solt, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, first of all, I would like to congratulate to the rapporteurs for the fantastic work they have done. Yes, Serbia is really a factor of stability in the Western Balkan regions, in a region which has historical tensions and historical wealth and diversity at the same time. Serbia, for example, was able to draw the conclusions from the very tragic wars of the 90s and to start a negotiation process, for example, with Hungary. That historical reconciliation which has taken place between our countries, I believe, is an example for many warring countries who are in tension with each other. And also, I would like to congratulate for the ongoing Pristina-Belgrade dialogue. There are many results of this process. However, there are elements of the 2013 Brussels Agreement, which was the consequence of the original Ahtisaari plan, which are still open. But we all remember that recognizing Kosovo and at the same time measures like the creation of the Association of the Serbian Municipalities have been very closely related to, and we are still discussing these questions when we are talking, for example, about the Kosovo Council of Europe membership. Colleagues, what I would like to draw your attention to is that we have got a momentum, and I think we have got the best moment to discuss after 14 years Serbia again in the Council of Europe, because the European Union enlargement is at a critical momentum. We have seen that the Ukrainian and Moldovan opening of the negotiations have just been decided last week. And now I think this is a huge possibility for the Western Balkans, and especially countries like Montenegro, Albania, Serbia, Macedonia. And I am very glad to see and to realize that Serbia is ready to cooperate closely on, for example, the Mirdic laws with the Venice Commission and also with ODIHR. And there is now hopefully an agreement on the Media Council, including the participation of the Hungarian community in the Media Council. I think we have to be very optimistic and at the same time reserved when we are having this very important subject in front of us. There are national interests. The Serbian people know that. Government, opposition, civil society should unite to use this historical momentum in front of Serbia. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. And now I call from ALDE, Ms. Lucia Plavakova.
Dear President, dear colleagues and friends, since the tragic collapse of the canopy at the Novi Sad railway station in November 2024, which killed 16 people, Serbian society has been shaken and rightly outraged. This tragedy was only the tip of the iceberg. Widely perceived as the result of corruption and negligence, the incident became a catalyst for mass protests across the country. And what has been the response of President Vucic's regime? A demonstration of brute power, intimidation, smear campaigns, also against the opposition. The Vice President of PSG and Member of Parliament, Ana Oreg, was subjected to unlawful surveillance by Serbia's Security Intelligence Service without a clear legal basis, resulting in the monitoring of both her activities and the party's internal communications. Recordings were later used to prosecute and detain party members on allegations of attempting to overthrow the constitutional order, which can be obviously described as the political misuse of state security institutions. It represents a serious violation of European democratic standards, while also illustrating a broader pattern of state capture and the erosion of the rule of law in Serbia. At the same time, we have witnessed a number of legislative changes that risk undermining democratic institutions in Serbia. Mrdić laws, the package of new judicial legislation, pushed through under urgent procedures and without public consultation. When you have bad intentions, you try to hide them in the dark. And I believe that it was also this case. We have also seen recurring attempts to restrict freedom of assembly and association. In other words, Serbia's non-democratic trajectory is being reinforced in two fronts, through legislative changes and through excessive use of state power. Together, these developments have a deeply damaging effect on democratic institutions and the rule of law. I also welcome the final remarks of the report on the important human rights issues, including the rights of national minorities, women, and LGBTI people, which will be examined further into the forthcoming monitoring report on Serbia. However, it must be noted that targeting women, or other minorities, which is happening in Serbia, also undermines democratic institutions and could have been part of the discussed report. Let us hope that this report, together with the monitoring process, will help Serbia return to a democratic path. The courageous people of Serbia are very much in my thoughts, and I hope to see the country become a strong, free, and democratic member of our European family. Thank you.
Thank you, and I now call from the UEL, Mr. George Loukaitis. George, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jensen. Dear colleagues, on behalf of the UEL Group, I would like to thank the co-rapporteurs for their comprehensive report. The report acknowledges that Serbia has made progress in a number of important areas, including judicial reforms, anti-corruption efforts, and the alignment of legislation with Council of Europe standards. These developments deserve recognition and should be further encouraged. At the same time, the report identifies a number of issues that continue to require attention. It points to challenges related to political polarization, the functioning of democratic institutions, the electoral framework, and the quality of public dialogue. These are matters that are important for the healthy functioning of any democracy and merit continued engagement by the Serbian authorities. The report also highlights concerns regarding freedom of expression, media pluralism, and the environment in which journalists, civil society organizations, and human rights defenders operate. Equally important are the recommendations concerning the independence of the judiciary and the implementation of the opinions of the Venice Commission and other Council of Europe monitoring bodies. These events, the events that followed the Novi Sad tragedy have had a profound impact on Serbian society. The calls for transparency, accountability, and public confidence in institutions should be addressed through independent investigations and full respect for democratic rights and freedoms. Our role in this Assembly is not to pass political judgments, but to assess compliance with the standards and commitments that all Member States have undertaken. In that spirit, we support the draft resolution and encourage the Serbian authorities to continue their efforts to address the concerns identified by the rapporteurs through dialogue, institutional reforms, and full cooperation with the Council of Europe mechanism. Thank you.
Thank you, and I call the next speaker from the Socialist Democrat and Greens group, Mr. Fassino. Piero, you have the floor.
Grazie, signor Presidente. I speak Italian. La Serbia, noi sappiamo, non solo è il paese più popoloso dei Balcani occidentali, ma da sempre la Serbia ha un ruolo centrale in quella regione. Quel che accade in Serbia influenza tutto ciò che accade e investe la regione dei Balcani. Per questo la nostra Assemblea è così attenta a quello che sta accadendo in quel paese. Io ringrazio i relatori e il loro impegno e hanno sottolineato nell'illustrarci la risoluzione come la Serbia sia investita oggi da una fortissima polarizzazione tra il governo e il partito di maggioranza e i movimenti di società civile. Ci sono state 4 elezioni anticipate negli ultimi 9 anni e questo già, come dire, testimonia della tensione politica che investe la Serbia, e tra pochi mesi forse si potrebbero avere delle 5ª elezioni anticipate. Io penso che occorre quindi essere molto vigili e chiedere alle autorità serbe quello che la nostra risoluzione indica, una piena applicazione dello Stato di diritto e delle regole del Consiglio d'Europa seguendo le indicazioni della Commissione di Venezia, l'indipendenza della magistratura, la libertà dei media, la tutela dei giornalisti, la lotta alla corruzione, il rispetto delle regole democratiche, una gestione dell'ordine pubblico equo e rispettoso dei cittadini. Sono punti essenziali perché da come queste cose verranno garantite deriverà il giudizio dell'Unione Europea sul percorso di integrazione e di adesione della Serbia all'Unione. Così come sono essenziali la normalizzazione dei rapporti tra Serbia e Kosovo, che languiscono e sono fermi da mesi, il rispetto dell'integrità della Bosnia di fronte ai rischi separatisti che vengono spesso fomentati nella Srpska, il rispetto degli assetti che si sono decisi a Dayton e che sono assetti che sono stati decisi per dare stabilità e sicurezza all'intera regione. Insomma, noi abbiamo bisogno che la Serbia acceleri il processo di assunzione piena dello Stato di diritto e delle regole democratiche. E questo proprio perché quello che la Serbia fa influenzerà tutto ciò che accadrà in questi prossimi anni nei Balcani occidentali che sono nel pieno di un percorso di integrazione europea che noi abbiamo il dovere di sostenere e di aiutare. E il Consiglio d'Europa, questa Assemblea e le strutture del Consiglio d'Europa intendono e vogliono accompagnare la Serbia in questo percorso, in questo cammino, e per questo il nostro gruppo approverà la risoluzione che è stata proposta dai relatori. Grazie.
Thank you. And as the last speaker from the political groups from EPP, Mr. Cavallo, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, I would like to thank the reporters for their comprehensive and blameless work. This report recognizes an important reality. Serbia has made significant progress since joining the Council of Europe in 2003. It is a fact that Serbia has made progress in a number of areas. Judicial reforms have been undertaken, important legislative changes have been adopted, and efforts have been made to align national legislation with the recommendations of the Venice Commission. These developments deserve recognition. At the same time, it is equally clear that important challenges remain. The political landscape is highly polarized, trust between institutions and society has been affected, and further efforts are needed to ensure fully functioning democratic institutions. Media pluralism and the independence of the judiciary and the full implementation of the recommendations of the Venice Commission, ODIHR and other Council of Europe bodies remain of the utmost importance. We cannot ignore the profound impact of the Novi Sad tragedy had on the Serbian society. The emergence of student movements as a significant social and political actor demonstrates both the concerns and aspirations of a new generation of Serbian citizens. EPP supports this report because it combines two essential principles: fairness and ambition. Fairness in acknowledging the progress achieved, ambition in encouraging Serbia to continue its path to reform. Serbia is a key partner for the stability, prosperity and the security of the Western Balkans. Its future lies in a democratic, stable and European Serbia. For that reason, it is essential that the country maintains its strategic objective of membership of the European Union and continues aligning its institutions and practices with European standards. We also encourage the Serbian authorities to continue fostering constructive relations with the neighbours. Regional cooperation, reconciliation and good neighbourly relations remain fundamental pillars for lasting stability in the Western Balkans. This includes strengthening political, economical and people-to-people ties with all European partners, including Poland, which has consistently supported the European perspective of the region and remains an important partner within the wider European family. The Council of Europe must remain a platform for dialogue, engagement and democratic process. Our objectives should be not to isolate, but to accompany and encourage reform. For these reasons, EPP will support the report and calls on the Serbian authorities to continue moving forward on the European path with determination and confidence. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Madame Pilar Carra. You have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, chers collègues. Je tiens tout d'abord à remercier les co-rapporteurs pour la qualité du rapport qui dresse un constat lucide et alarmant sur la Serbie. La tragédie de Novi Sad en novembre 2024, qui a coûté la vie à 16 personnes, a révélé une corruption systémique intolérable. La jeunesse et les étudiants ont légitimement réclamé justice tout au long de l'année 2025. Face à ces mouvements, la réponse des autorités n'a pas été celle du dialogue, mais celle d'une répression disproportionnée, d'arrestations arbitraires et d'entraves majeures à la liberté de la presse. Et le 15 mars 2025, à Belgrade, l'utilisation présumée d'une arme sonique terrifiante, aujourd'hui examinée par la CEDH, est inacceptable. Si la pression populaire a poussé le Premier ministre Miloš Vučević à démissionner en janvier 2025, le système s'est depuis verrouillé. La Serbie s'éloigne de nos standards. Elle s'aligne sur la Russie et étouffe son opposition. Voter ce rapport est indispensable, mais nous devons exiger de Belgrade des mesures concrètes et immédiates. Premièrement, l'indépendance de la justice. La Serbie doit abroger ou modifier d'urgence les lois Merdić de janvier 2026 qui suppriment les garanties d'autonomie des procureurs, notamment sur l'enquête de Novi Sad. L'avis de la Commission de Venise doit être appliqué. Deuxièmement, la liberté publique. Il faut cesser l'usage illégal de logiciels espions comme Pegasus ou Novi Spy contre les journalistes et l'opposition. Troisièmement, l'intégrité électorale. Les fraudes massives constatées lors des élections locales en mars 2026 imposent une refonte du cadre électoral selon les normes de l'OSCE. Enfin, la lutte contre l'impunité. Le poste de procureur en chef pour les crimes de guerre, vacant depuis 2024, doit être pourvu sans délai. L'adhésion au Conseil de l'Europe impose des actes, pas des façades. Par conséquent, je vous invite à soutenir ce rapport, à continuer à lutter contre la corruption en Serbie et à encourager le renforcement des institutions pour plus de démocratie.
And the next speaker is Ms. Simonovic-Bratic. You have the floor.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, the main pillar on which this report rests in the qualification of the situation in Serbia is the tragedy that happened in Novi Sad, where 16 people lost their lives in November 2024. The reason for the protests was this tragedy, but the real cause was the announcement of the President Vučić just before the tragedy that he would bring prestigious foreign universities to Serbia and thus provide students in Serbia even higher quality education. The university community began to protest only because of fear of liberalization and the arrival of competition. That's why the main organizers of the protests are university professors who made their army out of students to defend their monopolistic position. In the name of universities' autonomy, they made the fortresses within the faculty buildings, and no one who not their soldier couldn't enter. So they done whatever they wanted until another tragedy happened, but this time on the Faculty of Philosophy in Belgrade that is in the same building with the rectorate. The report states that the student Milica Živković lost her life at the Faculty of Philosophy in Belgrade and that for police and the prosecutor was not allowed to enter the faculty to investigate her death without the permission of the rector. That is an absolute untrue statement, and the main question is how comes that students can be in the late hours in the faculty building surrounded by fire from pyrotechnical devices that were used on the protests. Instead of paying tribute to a dead colleague, students and professors attacked police trying to prevent them from investigating a tragic event or a murder. And to make this tragedy even more creepy, only 20 meters from the place of death, rector appeared at the balcony demanding from the students a support for his political campaign, hoping to escape the responsibility. So, dear colleagues, next time when you try to defend university autonomy, remember this vivid example from Serbia because it might happen to you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I now call on Ms. Pantic-Pilja. You have the floor.
Thank you. The established practice of the Council of Europe is that a report on each state under the monitoring procedure should be presented every 2 years. The previous report on Serbia was adopted 14 years ago. During those 14 years, no fewer than 16 co-rapporteurs changed before we finally arrived at the report before us today, a report that contains incorrect and unverified information. In this report, you first expressed concern about the frequent holding of early elections, even though such elections have repeatedly been requested by the opposition. At the same time, the report notes that the student movement currently engaged in protest is demanding new elections. What do you want? The report also appears to suggest that the rule of law and democratic principles require pressure to be exerted on judicial authorities as it calls on the competent authorities to dismiss what is described as unfounded and arbitrary criminal charges against demonstrators. Same question, what do you want for us? Although this Assembly has held several debates on the situation in Serbia over the past year, in this report you again focus on demonstrators who have blocked roads and public spaces and consequently have been detained by the authorities and whose release you call for. Let me remind you on Sweden, where 20 demonstrators who blocked a university were arrested. Engaged activists were detained for blocking roads. We didn't have a discussion on that topic. Nowhere in this report have you mentioned the condition in which Serbs live in Kosovo and Metohija, not the fact that ethnic cleansing is taking place there. That does not appear to concern you. There is a saying, when you have nothing meaningful to say, it is better to remain silent. It would have been better if you had continued to remain silent as you did over the previous 14 years.
Thank you. And I now call on Ms. Kientz. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I congratulate Ms. Tibler and Mr. Emery on an unflinching report. It captures what followed the Novi Sad tragedy. 4 million people on the streets in a country of under 7 million. The people of Serbia want what we all want, an open European democracy, free of rigged elections, corruption, state capture and the strangling of the press. Because a free press is the foundation democracy is built on, and in Serbia that foundation is being dismantled, deliberately and in plain sight. One by one, the independent newsrooms have had their leaders removed, and now the last of them, N1, Nova S and Danas, are being sold. Sold to a firm tied to Viktor Orban and to President Vucic, a firm whose media holdings are plagued by allegations of censorship, political interference and erosion of journalist standards. The head of the European Federation of Journalists put it plainly: if these outlets fall, almost complete darkness will reign in Serbia. The European Commission is now asking whether Serbia still deserves European funds, and that is the right question. So here is ours. Will we make the capture of a free press cost more than it is worth? Because right now, for the men dismantling it, it is a bargain. Respect for democracy does not stop at the border. How a government treats its neighbours tells you how they treat its own. We see it in Putin's Russia, war abroad and silence at home. We are seeing the same shape in Serbia, backing the men who tear Bosnia apart, sheltering the gunmen behind the Banska attack, no, arming the gunmen, because look at the serial numbers on those weapons, crushing Serbia's young protesters, snuffing out the last free press. For a country with Serbia's talent, this is a tragedy but not its destiny. The millions who've marched want a different path, and our task is not to be naive, but to be a voice for those who others seek to silence. Thank you.
And the next speaker is Ms. Kutic. You have the floor.
On the 25th of May, 1995, at 8:55 p.m., Novak Djukic made a direct order for a missile to be launched to Tuzla, in the city center, killing 71 young person. The average age was 23, and the youngest victim was 2 years old. Djukic was arrested in 2007 in Banja Luka and put on trial for war crimes and to receive a sentence of 20 years for war crimes against civilians. Subsequently, he fled to Serbia, where he is still free, and not only free, but receiving a direct support by the Serbian regime. And not only that, the Ministry of Defense subsequently financed publishing of books, spreading morbid theories about this war crime, and defending the fugitives and war criminals it harbors. I asked in October last year, what are we waiting for in analyzing and receiving reports about Serbia for 14 years? So we waited for 14 years, in a sense, for this moment to analyze the material about democratic functioning of institutions in Serbia. In the Article 18 of this resolution, the rapporteurs call the Assembly to urge the authorities to show a genuine commitment to investigating and adjudicating cases of war crimes, in particular by appointing the Chief Public Prosecutor for War Crimes, a position that has been vacant since 2024. My question to rapporteurs and to everybody in this chamber is, how likely do you think that this will take place by a country that's still harboring war criminals and defending them? Because I deeply believe that Serbia should be as far away from the EU as the victims of war criminals it protects and harbors are far from receiving justice and closure. Thank you.
And the next speaker is Ms. Konstantinovska-Stofievska. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dear colleagues, I made a little research before coming into this debate. And yes, the last report on Serbia was in 2012. North Macedonia, besides the closing of the post-monitoring period, 2019. Kosovo, the one and only, 2024. Albania, 2024. The only notion supporting a European perspective for the Western Balkans, 2022 and 2016. Montenegro, 2021. So we cannot be surprised that regional destabilization is the writing on the wall when we all think about Western Balkans. Western Balkans countries are in the waiting room of the EU for more than 20 years.
Some among us less, but I would not like to be pessimistic and to say that they have quite a wait ahead. Why? Because we keep putting Western Balkans under the rug, in the corner, and always talk about them when only we see them in specific circumstances. And yet, everyone keeps expecting that Western Balkans can get on without help, support, or assistance. If we leave a child unattended, the most horrible things can and will happen. It will be influenced, beaten, unsecured, it might even be attacked, and chaos can prevail. So, colleagues, we must not allow further derogation on one of the most strategical and geopolitically important regions to be left on its own. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Ms. Sasheva. You have the floor.
Yes.
Like this one.
Yeah.
Put it in this one.
Okay. I would like to start with commending the report of Ms. Victoria Thibault and Mr. Yunus Emre. It is concentrated mainly on the current political and social tensions in Serbia. I fully support the calls on the Serbian authorities to avoid the use of unnecessary or disproportionate force against protesters and members of the student movement. In the same time, we expect that the authorities have to investigate promptly, independently, and effectively cases of violence against protesters and cases of ill treatment in custody, and hold accountable all those responsible for violent acts, whether law enforcement officers or private individuals. However, our report coincides with the recently adopted report on Serbia by AFET, the Committee of Foreign Affairs in the European Parliament. Our colleagues there raised one, in my view, very important question, which have to be addressed seriously by Serbian authorities. And this is the rights of national minorities in Serbia. As Bulgarian, I would like to quote herewith a part of the already adopted AFET reports. Strongly condemns any policies, narrative or administrative practices aimed at redefining, fragmenting or denying of the identity of national minorities in Serbia, and in this context expresses concern over the promotion of artificial constructs such as the so-called shopping nation, which seeks to erase the existence of the Bulgarian community and deny its historical roots and cultural heritage and right of self-identification, which is protected under international law, stresses that identify is a matter of free personal choice and cannot be subject of political engineering or state-sponsored reinterpretation, calls on Serbian authorities to fully respect the historical continuity, cultural heritage and self-identification of the Bulgarian community, regrets the searches carried out by the Serbian authority at the Bosilegrad Cultural Center and the initiation of the pre-trial proceedings for ethnic hatred against NGO activists. In my view, the Council of Europe have to pay greater attention to the respect of the rights of the national minorities in Serbia, which is exactly the scope of our activities.
And I now give the floor to Ms. Dumitrescu. You have the floor.
President, esteemed rapporteurs, I congratulate you for your balanced report. You have accurately described the challenges facing Serbia democracy, polarization, frequent snap elections, pressure on judiciary and the media. I would like to draw attention to a point mentioned in paragraph 1 of the resolution, the specific obligation and commitments undertaken by Serbia upon accession in 2003 in opinion 239. Among them, full implementation of the rights of minorities. Today, 22 years later, we must also speak about the over 300,000 Serbian citizens who identify as Romanian or Vlachs in the Timok Valley. Your report notes in paragraph 3 that there are new serious concerns about the country's adherence to the principle of democracy, rule of law, and the observance of public freedoms. Allow me to mention 3 concrete examples for Timok. Right to education. The Serbian Constitution, in Article 79, guarantees education in the mother tongue. In Timok, there is not a single state class with teaching in Romanian. Parents demanding it, but the Ministry of Education in Belgrade systematically blocks authorization. Right to worship. Priests of the Romanian Orthodox Church are harassed, fined, and prevented from holding services, although Article 8 HAHR and Article 45 of the Serbian Constitution guarantee religious freedom. Right to media. For them, there is no public radio or TV station in Romanian. Esteemed colleagues, we are not asking for special status. We are asking Serbia to apply its own laws and the commitments it made in 2003 before this assembly. Thank you.
And the next speaker is Ms. Kovacs. You have the floor.
Thank you, distinguished chair, dear colleagues. Indeed, the last report of the Monitoring Committee on Serbia's honoring of its obligations and commitments dates back in 2012. Repeated early elections and changes of co-rapporteurs have created obstacles to the preparation of a new report on the country. Therefore, it is a positive step forward that the 2 co-rapporteurs were able to carry out a fact-finding visit and that this Assembly is now debating the report before it. The 2024 November tragedy in Novi Sad has had ongoing impact on political life and society in Serbia. The student movement has evolved into a potential civic force. But I would like to speak about the obligations. After the adopted so-called Mrdić laws, the Serbian authorities have cooperated closely with the Venice Commission, which adopted its opinion as its June plenary session following a request from the Speaker of our National Assembly. Serbia is now in the process of implementing the Venice Commission's recommendation. The extraordinary sitting of the National Assembly to consider the amendments draft laws began last Wednesday. The debate is currently ongoing, and the vote is expected to take place by the end of this week at the latest. Amendments to the law on the Unified Voter Register were adopted last November. The law envisaged establishing a permanent and inclusive commission for the revision of the voter register. Amendments to 4 laws were adopted in May this year. The law on the election of members of parliament, the law on local elections, the law on the elections of the President of the Republic, and the law on the Constitutional Court. Work is also under the way on the law on financing political activities and the law on the prevention of corruption, which has been further aligned with Greco recommendation. So all in all, these are the real things Serbia did in the last few months. And it is obvious that there is a big polarization, the political polarization. But I'm not convinced that this kind of reports, which are not so balanced, would help us. So please, next time, try to at least listen to both sides. Thank you.
Thank you. And I now call Mr. Gola. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Dear colleagues, I would like to congratulate the reporters on this report. I believe it contains many important recommendations which, if addressed, could help Serbia democratize itself. Beyond the insufficient attention given to the long-standing violations of the rights of the minorities, especially Albanian community in Serbia, I would like to address the infamous Banjska attack. I believe the language used in the report understates its nature, describing it merely as a clash between police and Serb gunmen. In its resolution on Banjska, the European Parliament described the attack as follows. A group of heavily armed ethnic Serb paramilitaries carried out a terrorist attack in the north of Kosovo. Also, the EU High Representative Joseph Borrell condemned the attack as a hideous and cowardly terrorist attack against Kosovo police officers. Additionally, the operation was led by Milan Radojic, widely known as a confidant of President Vučić, who publicly took responsibility for the attack, which claimed the life of a police sergeant, Afrim Bunyaku, and deprived 3 young children of their father. This attack, ladies and gentlemen, revealed several uncomfortable truths about democracy and rule of law in Serbia. First, Serbia has yet to demonstrate its readiness to build normal relations, especially with Kosovo. Second, rather than ensuring accountability, it continues to protect those responsible, as evidenced by the fact that Radojic continues to reside freely and under protection in Serbia. In this way, Serbia has become a violator of the very values that the Council of Europe was founded to uphold and protect. Therefore, if our goal is to help Serbia democratize, we should not soften or obscure unpleasant facts through neutralizing language. The real test of a state is not how it embraces a comfortable truth, but how it reckons with uncomfortable ones. And Banjska is one such uncomfortable truth that Serbia, sooner or later, will have to reckon with. Thank you very much.
And the next speaker is Ms. Pasic. You have the floor.
I would like to thank the rapporteurs for this accurate report. Despite constant warnings from Europe, the Serbian regime continues to act in the same manner. In fact, the situation is worsening. Recently, the president of the ruling Serbian Progressive Party signed a cooperation agreement with the Communist Party of China, openly declaring that they share the same values. That means the suppression of democracy, the silencing of critics, and the systemic violation of human rights. Instead of moving toward Brussels and Strasbourg, Serbia is turning toward Beijing. Simultaneously, a hostile propaganda campaign is being conducted in Serbia, targeting both the democratic opposition and the European Union. According to recent European Commission surveys, public support for Serbia's EU membership has dropped from 67% in 2012 to a mere 31%. This is proof that Aleksandar Vučić and his regime have no intention to ever letting Serbia join the EU. Serbia will soon face elections under deeply unfair conditions. In just a single year, President Vučić appeared on national TV channels, including public broadcaster, more times than their days in a year. Meanwhile, the largest opposition party of Freedom and Justice was allowed a grand total of just 17 minutes over 3 entire years. This is why we insist on full implementation of all of the recommendations. We must end water pressure, stop vote buying, and halt the blatant misuse of public resources. Without these fundamental changes, free elections are impossible, and Serbia's European future will remain entirely out of reach. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Mr. Dodic. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I come from Serbia, and today I'm not asking this assembly to believe the opposition. I'm asking to believe its own report. This report speaks about violence against protesters, about intimidation, about pressure on journalists, about corruption, about institutions that are losing public trust, and about 16 dead citizens in Novi Sad. 16, not in a war, not in a natural disaster, in a train station, built under contract, approved by officials, opened with applause. That was not just an accident. It was the result of a system where nobody is ever held responsible. When citizens ask who is responsible, they are told to be patient. When students ask, they are called troublemakers. When journalists ask, they become targets. When oppositions ask, it becomes the problem. The people protesting in Serbia are not fighting against Serbia. They are fighting for Serbia. For a Serbia where public office means responsibility, not privilege. Because the crisis in Serbia is no longer a crisis of politics, it's a crisis of trust. And when citizens stop trusting institutions, democracy does not collapse in a single day. It collapses one unanswered question at a time. The report
contains the questions the Assembly must demand the answers, not ask, demand. And today we have a choice, to look away or to stand by our own principles. I urge you to support this report for the credibility of this Assembly, for the citizens of Serbia, and for values of the Council of Europe. And just for the record, Kosovo is Serbia. Thank you.
And I call on the next speaker. It's Mr. Haido. You have the floor.
President, dear colleagues, Hungary has a direct strategic interest in a stable, democratic Serbia. We remain a steadfast supporter of the EU integration of Serbia and the entire Western Balkans. Some began this European journey over a decade ago. If Europe offers delay without recognizing genuine progress, public confidence in enlargement will decline. But credibility is a two-way street. Supporting Serbia's European future cannot mean silence about democratic shortcomings. The concerns raised in this report regarding electoral conditions, pressure on protesters, media pluralism, civil society, and judicial independence must be taken seriously. At the same time, our assessment must remain objective and consistent. Conclusions should rest on agreed Council of Europe principles, verifiable facts, independent procedures, and equal treatment of every country. We should distinguish carefully between established facts and allegations requiring investigations. Serious allegations must be investigated independently and effectively, and we will support further efforts to monitor the situation. Hungary also has a particular responsibility towards the Hungarian community in Vojvodina. We want its language, education, culture, media, and participation in public life to be protected. These rights belong to the whole community and to its individual members. They must never depend on political alignments. Serbia belongs in Europe. Progress must be achievable, support must be available, and accession must remain genuinely merit-based for Serbia and for all other aspirant countries. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Ms. Chaka. You have the floor.
There we go. Thank you. Esteemed Chair, dear colleagues, I'd like to thank the co-rapporteurs for their valuable work. The report provides a comprehensive assessment on a number of important developments in Serbia. At the same time, there are several issues which, in my view, warrant greater attention and should have been more adequately reflected in the text. It is regrettable that the situation of the Albanian community in the Preševa Valley receives only limited attention in the discussions concerning democratic standards and fundamental rights. The effective protection of minority rights, equal access to public services and institutions, and meaningful participation in public life remain essential benchmarks for every member state of our organization and deserve continued scrutiny. It is also a matter of concern that nearly 3 years after the Banjska terrorist attack of September 2023, full accountability has yet to be ensured. Several individuals linked to these events remain at large, while important questions regarding responsibility and follow-up measures remain unanswered. Meaningful progress in this regard would contribute significantly to trust, security, and long-term stability in the region. Furthermore, Serbia's continued opposition to Kosovo's membership in the Council of Europe remains, to say the least, disappointing. Regardless of political differences, extending the protection of the European Convention on Human Rights and access to the mechanisms of this organization to all citizens of Kosovo would strengthen democratic standards, the rule of law, and human rights protection across Europe. These issues are not merely matters of bilateral concern. They relate directly to the principles, obligations, and commitments of all member states that all member states have undertaken within the Council of Europe, and for this reason they deserved clear recognition and reflection in this document and would have contributed to a more balanced and comprehensive reflection of the challenges that remain to be addressed. Thank you.
And dear colleagues, as announced, I must now interrupt the list of speakers. The speeches of members on the speakers list who have been present during the debate but not have been able to speak may be given to the table office for publication in the official reports. These speeches must not exceed 400 words, and I remind colleagues that the typewritten texts can be submitted electronically, if possible, no later than 4 hours after the list of speakers is interrupted. And now I will call Ms. Tiblum and Mr. Emre to reply. And you have 5 minutes in total. I call Mr. Emre first. Or Ms. Tiblum, as you wish.
We want to thank the speakers for your input and your support. This report is a first and much needed step toward a more comprehensive report, including the situation for minorities in Serbia. As you all have noted, it has been more than 14 years since the last one, and we chose to focus on the functioning of democratic institutions. To Ms. Sacheva, a report in the European Parliament was also critical about the situation in Serbia, and the right of minorities were not examined here, which have been saved for a future monitoring report. We are fully aware that the situation is complex due to the existence of numerous national minorities, something that was also brought up by Ms. Dumitrescu. To Mrs. Kovacs, on Medic laws, we welcome that the Minister of Justice proposed amendments that were positively assessed by the Venice Commission in June. The Venice Commission said that the draft laws implemented 4 out of 9 recommendations from April. However, these draft laws need to be adopted by the Parliament as soon as possible. And then let me see the notes here. Regarding the Unified Voter Register, according to civil society, little has been done in practice to work that should continue for the next 3 to 4 years. I'm sorry, I cannot. I'm sorry. Yeah, I will stop there. I cannot read what it says. Thank you.
Dear colleagues, yes, when we started our work on the report on Serbia, we noticed that our work will not be easy because, there were 14 years of monitoring and there was no monitoring report. For this reason, the first principle for us to be balanced, balanced for the progress Serbia had in these 14 years and the concerns. And as my colleague Victoria told, there are many important criticisms in this debate. We are very grateful for all these views. And I should also point out that, for instance, in the report we noted human rights abuses on demonstrations, use of violence in demonstrations. And it's obvious that we are not the only ones who noted these problems. For instance, Commissioner of Human Rights of Council of Europe came to similar conclusions of his visit to Serbia in May 2026, this year. Or the question of early elections. Yes, it's obvious that early elections were asked by opposition, that's true. But it's obvious that early elections are too often, and they are for the interest of ruling parties. And yes, there are many problems with national minorities, that's true. There are many issues of international politics, that's true. But this report is a report of democratic institutions in Serbia. So this type of issues, as far as I understand, not for this report. For instance, the Kosovo issue is an issue of a report for Political Affairs Committee, not for Monitoring Committee. And lastly, we are not party of political conflicts in Serbia. We are observers. We are co-rapporteurs of the political situation in the country. And we used many credible sources like Venice Commission reports, election observation, international election observation reports, ODIHR reports. Also, we are very lucky that there is a very important office of Council of Europe in Belgrade. So they are very good at their job. Also, our secretariat helped us in many ways. So this is the end result. And once again, I would like to thank all political groups and all members of the Assembly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I will now ask the chairperson, or the vice chairperson of the committee, Mr. Gerardo Gianvenoli. And you wish to speak, it seems. You have the floor. 3 minutes.
Dear President, dear colleagues, since 2003, Serbia has been under the Assembly's monitoring procedure. The last report of the Monitoring Committee on Serbia dates from 2012. In its resolution 1858 of 2012, of 25th January 2012 on the honoring of obligations and commitments by Serbia, the Assembly welcomed the significant progress achieved in implementing obligations and commitments entered into accession in 2003. At the same time, it resolved to pursue its monitoring of Serbia and invited the latter to make substantial progress in the following 5 key areas. Full implementation of the reform of the judiciary in order to guarantee its independence and efficiency, adoption of and implementation of effective anti-corruption policies, adoption of amendments to the criminal code in line with the Greco recommendations, improvement of the situation of the media, and finally, implementation of the rights of minority, especially Roma. Since 2012, several attempts to submit a new report by the Monitoring Committee were delayed due to a wide range of reasons. The frequent changes of co-rapporteurs, yearly general election, and the COVID-19 pandemic. Since then, the situation in Serbia has considerably changed, in particular due to an unprecedented wave of mass protests following the collapse of the Novi Sad railway station canopy. Initially led by students, since November 2024, the protests had spread across the country to include various social groups demanding accountability, transparency, justice, and early elections. Therefore, I'm happy that after 14 years, the Monitoring Committee approved the co-rapporteur's report on Serbia. The report, which is a report on the functioning of democratic institutions instead of a regular monitoring report, does not cover all problematic issues, including the rights of national minority. It takes stock of the developments concerning the 4 main outstanding issues mentioned in the 2012 resolution, points out issues of concern, and contains numerous recommendations for the authorities. The co-rapporteurs decided to fast-track the report on Serbia because of a probability that the new early election will be organized by the end of this year. As a member of the Council of Europe, Serbia is committed to upholding fundamental rights, the rule of law, and democratic standards. I hope that it will continue to demonstrate its commitment to implement the organization's standards. The Assembly, and in particular the Monitoring Committee, will be watching closely. I hope that the Assembly will back the draft resolution. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Gianvenoli. The Monitoring Committee has presented a draft resolution to which 20 amendments have been tabled, and they will now be taken in the order in which they appear in the compendium. And I remind you that speeches on amendments are limited to 30 seconds. And I understand that the Vice chairperson of the committee wishes to propose to the Assembly that amendments 14, 15, 16, 17 and 13 to the draft resolution, which were unanimously approved by the committee, be declared as definitively approved. Is that so, Mr. Giardinoli? That is so. Thank you. And if no one objects, I'll consider these amendments to be approved. Is there any objection? There is not. So amendments 14, 15, 16, 17 and 13 to the draft resolutions are therefore approved and will not be called. And I also understand that the chairperson of the committee wishes to propose to the Assembly that amendments 1, 2, 3, 20, 6, 7, 8, 10, 9 and 19 to the draft resolutions, which were rejected by the committee with a two-thirds majority, be declared as definitively rejected. I understand that Amendment 11 to the draft resolution was also rejected by the committee with a two-thirds majority, but however, because Amendment 18 is consequential to Amendment 11, Amendment 11 will still be taken separately. Is that so, Mr. Vice Chair? It is so. So if no one objects, I will consider the amendments to be rejected. Is there any objection? So then amendments 1, 2, 3, 20, 6, 7, 8, 10, 9 and 19 to the draft resolution are therefore rejected and will not be called. And I now we are going to amendment number 12 first, and I call Mr. Vladimir Dodovich to support amendment number 12. You have 30 seconds.
Thank you, Chair. I support this amendment because it distinguishes between the constitutional right to call early election and the potential abuse of that right for political advantage. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone want to speak against this amendment? If not the case, then what is the opinion of the committee? The committee was in favor of this amendment, and I now put it to a vote. The vote is open. And the vote is closed, and I call for the result to be displayed. The amendment is agreed to. And then I move to amendment number 5, and I call Ms. Biljana Pantic-Pilja to support amendment 5. You have 30 seconds.
Thank you. I see no reason why this last sentence was included in paragraph 13. We had one observation mission at the most recent parliamentary elections. Its report contains some point of criticism, but also phrase, overall, the election observation mission report was balanced and measured. There is no reason to only stress shortcoming here if explains of progress are not highlighted as well. Omitting the sentences will result in a better resolution text. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone want to speak against the amendment? If that's yes.
Thank you, Chair. I oppose this amendment because it presents unresolved recommendations as if they were already been adequately implemented. Thank you.
And what is the opinion of the committee? The committee is against. And I will now put the amendment.
The committee rejected it.
Yeah. I now put the amendment to the vote, and the vote is open. And the vote is closed, and I call for the result to be displayed.
It's rejected.
The amendment is rejected. And we now go to amendment number 4, and I call Ms. Biljana Pantic-Pilja to support amendment 4.
Simply does not hold true. It may have appeared in April when the report was being drafted that this was the case, but that is no longer accurate. 2 weeks ago, the Venice Commission held a session and issued its opinion. And last week, and this week, and today, our National Assembly has been considering draft laws that will take into account the Venice Commission's position. Subsequently, the audio recommendation will also be on the agenda. Therefore, our proposal is far more accurate. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone want to speak against? Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I oppose this amendment because it removes the findings of international election observers and weakens the factual basics of the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. And what is the opinion of the committee?
Committee was against.
The committee is against, and I now put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open.
So on the next one. Sorry. Okay. Closed.
And the vote is closed, and I call for the result to be displayed.
It is rejected.
This is rejected. And then we turn to amendment number 11, and I call on Ms. Alicia Kienz to support amendment 11.
Thank you. This amendment is about the functioning of Serbia's legal system, a key part of Serbia's democracy. 2 years ago, a group of heavily armed militia crossed into Kosovo and killed Police Sergeant Afram Bunjaku. Fortunately, they achieved none of their further terrorist aims. The man who admitted leading that attack walks free in Belgrade today. Vucic refuses to extradite him and promised Serbia's court he would act. This assembly stands for human rights and justice, and my main name's what happens in Banska, a failure of justice. However, I will withdraw it.
Somebody takes note.
And we have registered that you have withdrawn the amendment. We take note of that.
And we on to the next one. So,
Mr. Dordovic, it is withdrawn.
So you move on to the next one.
So we'll go to amendment number 18.
Number 10. Sorry, 18. Yes.
Yes, 18. And I call Ms. Albana Voxi to support amendment 18. You have 30 seconds. Is Ms. Voxi in the room? Okay. Any other who wants to support this amendment? Anyone wants to speak against? Yeah, Mr. Dordovic.
No, it's not.
I oppose this amendment because it politicizes this report and introduces issues that fell outside its core purpose and mandate. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just got the information that if not anyone is moving it, then it falls. So this amendment falls. Thank you. And then we go to amendment...
Page 50. No.
Not number.
Yes, page 50.
We move now to the draft resolution as a whole, as contained in document 16424. And we need a simple majority. So I open the vote. And I close the votes and ask for the result to be displayed. And the amendment, or the resolution, is adopted. Congratulations.
Thank you, colleagues. If we could move on then to the next item of business this afternoon, which is the debate on the report titled Democracy, Human Rights and the Rule of Law in Iran, document 16413, presented by Mr Max Lux on behalf of the Committee on Political Affairs and Democracy. We will then hear from Mr Pablo Ispan, who will present an opinion on behalf of the Committee on Legal Affairs and Human Rights. We will then hear from Mr Jacques Paris. We will have a statement from him. He was held hostage in Iran. In order to finish by 8 p.m, I will have to interrupt the list of speakers at around 7:30 p.m. to allow for the reply and the vote. With that then, I call on Mr Max Lux, the rapporteur. You have 7 minutes now and 3 minutes at the end to reply to the debate this afternoon.
Dankeschön, Herr Präsident, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen. Als mich unsere Versammlung im Januar zum Berichterstatter für die Lage der Menschenrechte im Iran gewählt hat, konnte ich diese dunkelsten Stunden für das iranische Volk, denen es nun ausgesetzt ist, nicht absehen. Wir haben keine Kraft mehr zu kämpfen, sagte mir vor einer Woche eine Menschenrechtsaktivistin aus dem Iran, die aus Angst vor dem Regime unerkannt bleiben möchte. Diese Kraftlosigkeit kommt von einem Regime im Inneren, das im Januar diesen Jahres Zehntausende seiner insbesondere jungen Menschen auf den Straßen hingerichtet hat, nur weil sie nach Freiheit und einem besseren Leben strebten. Diese Kraftlosigkeit kommt allerdings auch von außen. Sie kommt von unseren westlichen Gesellschaften, in denen der Einsatz der Menschen für ihre Freiheit abgetan wird. Abgetan als Einmischung oder als nicht so wichtig. Diese Kraftlosigkeit kommt von einem US-Präsidenten Donald Trump, der im Januar noch Hilfe versprach und nun dieses Regime so stärkt, wie kein US-Präsident vor ihm dieses Regime gestärkt hat. Wir entscheiden uns heute mit meinem Bericht dafür, hinzuschauen, statt wegzusehen. Und ich muss Ihnen dieses Hinschauen zumuten. Über 30.000 Menschen wurden im Januar 2026 auf offener Straße im Iran hingerichtet. Ein beispielloser Akt enthemmter, entgrenzter, maßloser Gewalt dieses Regimes gegen seine eigene Bevölkerung. Augenzeugen berichten davon, wie insbesondere ab dem 8. Januar wahllos auf friedliche Demonstranten geschossen wurde, ihre Schussverletzungen an Bäuchen, Köpfen, Genitalien nicht behandelt wurden und die Leichen in Massengräbern 50 Kilometer von Teheran entfernt verscharrt wurden. Sie haben Massenmord begangen. Niemand kann sich das vorstellen. Ich sah nur Blut, 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 sagt ein Arzt, der illegal von zu Hause half. Offizielle Berichte oder Dokumentation all dieser Verbrechen gibt es nicht, weil sie nicht möglich sind. Diese 30.000 Menschen sind nicht bloß eine Zahl, sie waren Väter, Mütter, beste Freundinnen, Tanten, Onkel, Töchter und Söhne. Wir haben hier eine Pflicht. Diese grausamen Verbrechen, aber vor allem diese Menschen mit ihren Geschichten, ihren Schicksalen, ihrem Wunsch nach Freiheit dürfen nicht in unsere Vergessenheit geraten. Die Massenerschießungen sind nur die Spitze des Eisbergs eines Systems, dominiert von der Revolutionsgarde IRGC, das die eigene Bevölkerung strukturell drangsaliert und unterdrückt. Die höchste Hinrichtungsrate pro Kopf weltweit, tausende politische Gefangene, für die sich unsere Idee der europäischen Rule of Law fast schon zynisch anhören muss, weil sie so weit entfernt ist und die natürlich auch uns sowie unseren Bürgerinnen und Bürgern den Rechtsstaat vorenthalten. Lieber Jacques Paris, 4 Jahre lang wurden du und deine Frau vom iranischen Regime als Geiseln gehalten. Willkommen zu Hause. Willkommen zurück in Europa. Willkommen zurück in einem Europa, das sich niemals damit abfinden darf und wird, wenn seine Bürger als Geiseln genommen werden. Ob den Fall von Nahi Takavi, Olivier van de Castle oder deiner lieben Frau Cécile Colère, wir vergessen eure Fälle nicht und wir werden nicht aufhören, uns einzusetzen, bis endlich auch Ahmad Reza Jalali frei ist. Europa muss endlich gemeinsam für seine Bürger einstehen, das ist auch ein Kern meines Berichts. Der lange Arm des Regimes aus dem Iran greift bis nach Europa und er greift mitten unter uns an. Das zeigt der Angriff auf den Exiljournalisten Puria Zerati in London oder ein nachweislich von staatlichen Stellen des Irans beauftragter Brandanschlag auf die Synagoge in meinem Wahlkreis in Bochum. Europa muss die Bedrohung für die exiliranische und die jüdische Gemeinschaft endlich ernst nehmen und verstehen und handeln. Und in dem Zusammenhang möchte ich auch auf einen sehr guten Bericht zum Thema der transnationalen Repression verweisen, der letzte Woche erst im Europäischen Parlament verabschiedet wurde. Selbst, meine Damen und Herren, selbst in den dunkelsten Stunden stehen die Menschen im Iran für die Hoffnung. Ob Belutschen, Bahai, Perser oder Kurden. Sie alle eint das Streben nach einem besseren Morgen. Warum sollte ich aufhören, nur die Stimme bleibt, steht auf dem Grabstein der Dichterin Furro Farrokhzad im Norden von Teheran. Wenn die Menschen im Iran im Angesicht der enthemmten Gewalt gegen sie, des im Stichlassens durch Donald Trump, des Schweigens europäischer Regierungen nicht aufhören, dann müssen wir den Platz an ihrer Seite einnehmen, damit sie eines Tages frei und selbstbestimmt leben können. Dear colleagues, I believe from my heart that it's really time to send a clear message and a clear signal to the people of Iran who were too much forgotten in the last weeks and especially very much forgotten in our public media discourse. I think it's extremely important to send them today an extremely clear and an extraordinary message here from the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. The message that we do not let these people of Iran down and that we take a stand on their side. And that is why I ask you to adopt this resolution today. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lukes. I now call on Pablo Ispan for the opinion from the Committee on Legal Affairs and Human Rights. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Colleagues, this report provides a thorough account of the destructive acts of the Islamic Republic of Iran. The country has been a threat to the peace in the Middle East since 1979, a country that has called to destroy some of its neighbors. The regime has used terrorism and support terrorist organizations such as Hamas and Hezbollah. The repression of women, the political opposition, religious minorities and LGTB community has resulted in tens of thousands of deaths. Furthermore, Iran retains the death penalty and uses it frequently. This is a regime whose very nature, including with regard to the role of women and their freedoms, constitutes an attack on the values promoted by the Council of Europe. Fresh news of the regime's brutal conduct emerged all the time. Only last week, we heard news that female Iranian singer Parastu Hamadi was reported sentenced to 74 lashes, along with 8 members of her production team. Her crime? Singing without wearing a hijab. Mr. Locke's report provides an excellent overview of the terrible situation in the country. I am grateful for this account of the Iranian government's repression of its own people, both at home and abroad, as well as its destabilized role in the Middle East. The report rightly recalls that as a provider of weapons to the Russian Federation to sustain its wars on aggression against Ukraine, as well as its widespread hybrid threats in Council of Europe member states, the Iranian regime also poses a significant threat to the European security. I am pleased that the report refers to the Iranian government's shocking widespread use of the death penalty as a tool of political repression, as the death penalty continues to be a highly important subject in the works of this Assembly. The Committee of Legal Affairs and Human Rights proposed 4 amendments. The first is to emphasize the regime targeting of women, the political opposition and minorities. The targeting persons based on their gender, political association, religious belief or sexual orientation goes against the very core values of the Council of Europe. The second amendment would establish the position of the Parliamentary Assembly that the repression conducted by the Iranian authorities since December 2025 may constitute crimes against humanity under international law. The third amendment calls for a common international strategy to combat hostage-taking by Iran. The international community may not be in a position to force Iran to stop this practice, but it can and should coordinate an effective common approach between governments. The fourth amendment aims to ensure that the full list of the Assembly recommendation to states on the combating of transnational repression applies in the fight against Iran transnational repression. One of these persons that was tried to kill by the Iranian were a friend of mine, Alejo Vidal Quadras, former Vice President of the European Parliament, that was shot in his face in the middle of Madrid. I want to congratulate Mr. Lux for his report and say that the cause of freedom in Iran is more strong thanks to the commitment of this passionate politician. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, it gives me great pleasure to welcome to our company in the hemicycle today, Mr. Jacques Paris. Many of you will know that he was detained in Iran along with his wife for nearly 4 years. He returned to France, I know, in April of this year. Mr. Paris, it's a great honour for us to have you with us. And could I now invite you to address the hemicycle?
Monsieur le Président, Mesdames et Messieurs, c'est un grand honneur pour moi de témoigner devant vous aujourd'hui, alors que la question des droits de l'homme en Iran est à l'ordre du jour. Ma compagne, Cécile Collère, et moi-même avons été détenus pendant près de 4 ans en Iran sur la base d'accusations aussi absurdes que mensongères. Nous avons été victimes de la politique de prise d'otages d'État du régime iranien. Aujourd'hui, il y a encore des otages, dont Craig et Lindsay Foreman, emprisonnés depuis janvier 2025, condamnés à 10 ans de prison pour espionnage, et Ahmad Reza Jalali, binational suédois, emprisonné depuis avril 2016, condamné à mort pour collaboration avec le Mossad et corruption sur terre. Les services de renseignement nous ont enlevés le 7 mai 2022 sans aucun mandat d'arrêt. C'est dans le quartier 209 de la prison d'Evin que nous avons passé l'essentiel de notre temps de détention. Le quartier 209 n'est pas une prison ordinaire, mais un centre d'interrogatoire sous le contrôle absolu des services de renseignement iraniens. La durée de séjour ne dépasse pas, en général, 3 mois, mais nous y avons été maintenus pendant 3 ans et demi, au quasi-secret, les communications avec nos familles étant aussi rares que brèves et surveillées. Voici quelques faits sur nos conditions de détention, qui sont aussi celles de nombreux prisonniers iraniens. Durant 1277 jours, nous avons vécu enfermés sous une lumière forte, allumée 24 heures sur 24, en isolement ou bien dans la promiscuité à 4 ou 5 prisonniers entassés dans une cellule de moins de 9 mètres carrés. En isolement, j'ai été transféré dans une cellule minuscule, surchauffée, sans aération. Je devais ramper sur le sol pour respirer le filet d'air frais qui passait sous la porte. Nous n'avions pas de lit, pas de chaise, pas de livre, pas le droit d'écrire. Nous étions condamnés à ne rien faire. Nous n'avions pas de fenêtre. Imaginez que vous soyez enfermés dans une cave pendant 3 ans et demi. Nous ne pouvions sortir que 3 fois 30 minutes par semaine dans une cour aussi exiguë que poussiéreuse. L'Iran ne respecte nullement les règles Mandela de traitement des détenus adoptés par les Nations Unies. Nous fûmes transférés dans une prison secrète fin juin 2025. Je fus à nouveau placé en isolement pendant 155 jours jusqu'à notre transfert à l'ambassade de France. Nous nous félicitons donc que le groupe de travail contre la détention arbitraire du Comité des droits de l'homme de l'ONU ait conclu en date du 28 août 2025 que notre privation de liberté est bel et bien arbitraire, exigeant alors notre libération immédiate. Nous avons comparu, comme bien d'autres prisonniers iraniens, devant la 15e chambre du tribunal révolutionnaire islamique de Téhéran, présidé par le juge Salavati, surnommé en Iran le juge de la mort. Il a prononcé des dizaines et des dizaines de condamnations à mort, ceux encore récemment. Lors de l'audience du 7 mai 2024, le juge Salavati nous a annoncé son intention de nous condamner à mort pour complot visant à renverser la République islamique, collusion avec le Mossad et corruption sur terre, qualification politique ou religieuses gravissimes en Iran. Nous avons été privés du libre choix de nos avocats, ceux qui avaient été choisis par nos familles ayant été récusés pour de prétendues raisons de sécurité nationale. Après 16 mois de détention, les services de renseignement nous ont attribué de faux avocats à leurs bottes. Les tribunaux révolutionnaires islamiques, c'est donc une justice sans établissement de preuves, sans débat contradictoire, sans droit à une défense indépendante. C'est une justice de détention arbitraire, de condamnations les plus lourdes, bien souvent de peine de mort. Finalement, nous avons été condamnés respectivement à 20 ans de prison pour ma compagne et 17 ans pour moi-même. Ce qui nous est arrivé n'a rien d'un accident. Nous avons été victimes d'un système dont le seul but est d'assurer par la terreur la survie du régime. Les libertés fondamentales de conscience, d'opinion, d'expression, d'association sont bafouées en permanence, comme est bafouée la Déclaration universelle des droits de l'homme et le pacte international relatif aux droits civils et politiques, dont l'Iran est pourtant partie prenante. Les méthodes que nous avons subies relèvent effectivement de la torture telle que définie par la Convention contre la torture et autres peines ou traitements cruels, inhumains ou dégradants de 1984, non ratifiée par l'Iran. Nous avons subi l'isolement prolongé, les menaces d'exécution et de mort, les pressions sur nos familles, une disparition forcée durant 6 mois et demi, les troubles provoqués du sommeil par l'exposition à une lumière permanente et forte, la désorientation dans le temps, l'exposition permanente à la peur, le maintien dans une situation d'incertitude absolue sur notre sort, les humiliations systématiques, le chantage et les punitions arbitraires, les menaces de violence extrêmes et les séances de simulation préparatoires, les aveux forcés médiatisés. Toutes ces méthodes sont documentées par le protocole d'Istanbul, le manuel édité par les Nations Unies pour enquêter sur la torture. Au cours de ces 4 années, nous avons été les témoins captifs de 2 soulèvements populaires portés par l'aspiration à la liberté et la démocratie. En septembre 2022, les Iraniens ont manifesté massivement à la suite du meurtre de la jeune Mahsa Jina Amini par la police des mœurs. Ils manifestaient aussi contre l'apartheid des genres. Femmes, vie, liberté, c'était le nom donné à ce mouvement. En janvier 2026, ils étaient encore plus nombreux dans les rues à manifester. Ils voulaient tout simplement vivre, ils voulaient la démocratie. Ils ont été réprimés dans le sang. Les morts se comptent en dizaines de milliers. Nous avons également été plongés au milieu de 2 guerres. Il s'en est aussi fallu de peu, le 23 juin 2025, lors de la guerre des 12 jours, pour que nous perdions la vie lors du bombardement de la prison d'Evin, qui a fait 79 morts. À l'ambassade de France, quotidiennement, le jour comme la nuit, nous avons aussi été éprouvés par les bombardements, parfois bien proches, du 28 février jusqu'à notre libération, le 8 avril. Nous avons été les témoins de scènes qui vous marquent à jamais, comme ce 8 mars au matin, où le jour ne s'est pas levé sur Téhéran, à la suite du bombardement des dépôts de carburant par les aviations israéliennes et américaines qui avaient proposé un nuage de fumée noire sur la ville. S'il existe aujourd'hui un cessez-le-feu, et tant mieux si les bombardements s'arrêtent, rien n'est réglé quant aux grandes questions qui intéressent le monde, comme le nucléaire ou la libre circulation maritime. Cette guerre a provoqué une onde de choc sur le monde, mais pour le peuple iranien, la situation est plus difficile encore qu'au début de la guerre. Le régime iranien n'est ni nouveau, ni réformé, mais il s'est durci. La répression s'est encore aggravée. Les exécutions capitales s'accélèrent. Les arrestations se comptent en dizaines de milliers. L'ensemble des institutions du régime, de ses bras répressifs, le judiciaire, les services de renseignement, les gardiens de la révolution sont toujours en place. Le peuple iranien a ainsi subi d'un côté l'intervention militaire des uns et de l'autre la répression du régime. On fera pleurer vos mères si vous manifestez. menaçait un journaliste sur une des chaînes gouvernementales pendant la guerre. La situation économique était telle avant la guerre que bien des familles ne pouvaient plus acheter le strict nécessaire pour vivre. Le peuple iranien, épuisé par la conjonction des guerres, de la répression et des privations, a tant besoin de paix et de liberté. On ne devrait pas l'oublier. On ne devrait pas oublier non plus que la démocratie n'est pas sous les tapis de bombes. Le régime iranien nous a volé 4 années de notre vie. Il nous semble qu'en témoignant, en contribuant à la réflexion, nous pouvons faire œuvre utile. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, Mr. Parry. And thank you very much for your address. Very powerful words, I'm sure we will all agree. I now move on to the debate itself. I remind the Assembly that speaking time is limited to 3 minutes for spokespersons for the political groups and 2 minutes for other members. The first speaker then is Bertrand Bousse.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Mes chers collègues, cher Monsieur Paris, après plusieurs mois de guerre entre les États-Unis et leurs alliés israéliens d'une part et l'Iran d'autre part, nous apercevons une lueur d'espoir à l'horizon, une lueur d'espoir pour la paix mondiale et l'équilibre économique international, tant celui-ci dépend encore au quart du XXIe siècle des énergies fossiles, dont une part significative transite par le Golfe Persique et le désormais célèbre détroit d'Ormuz. On ne peut que souscrire au constat de la résolution qui nous est soumise. Je cite, « Les ramifications du conflit ont montré à quel point des actions menées en dehors du cadre des règles et normes internationales contribuent à aggraver l'instabilité mondiale, notamment en exacerbant les tensions géopolitiques, en perturbant l'économie et en renforçant l'incertitude sur les marchés mondiaux énergétiques, pharmaceutiques et les fertilisants. Dès lors, les Européens que nous sommes ne peuvent que se réjouir des perspectives de paix, aussi fragiles soient-elles, mais qu'en est-il des Iraniens et surtout des Iraniennes, de leurs droits humains et de leurs aspirations démocratiques? Car, je le rappelle, libérer les Iraniens et les Iraniennes de la tyrannie était au moins dans le discours un début de guerre de la coalition américano-israélienne. Et quel a été le résultat? Un régime iranien plus puissant que jamais, c'était tout sauf imprévisible. Il y avait 2 résultats possibles à cette aventure. Soit susciter un réflexe nationaliste autour de la nation attaquée de l'extérieur. Le régime iranien a parfaitement su jouer ce ressort en accolant à toute contestation le sceau de la trahison. Il a pu réprimer à loisir, et même les plus farouches opposants au régime, les femmes, les jeunes. Les démocrates se sont retrouvés dans un dilemme, défendre leur pays avec le régime ou défendre la liberté et la démocratie en prenant le risque d'emporter le pays tout entier dans l'instabilité. C'est pour l'instant ce premier résultat qui a été obtenu par la guerre imprudemment lancée. La démocratie s'est encore éloignée des rives du Golfe Persique. La seconde possibilité qui pouvait résulter de cette intervention extérieure, c'est un effondrement général du pays, son morcellement, à l'image de ce que nous voyons en Irak, au Yémen ou en Somalie. C'est encore possible et ce n'est pas une bonne nouvelle. Les États-Unis, en dépit des rodomontades de leur président, connaissent le risque et ses conséquences autrement plus préjudiciables pour le peuple iranien, mais aussi pour le monde en général et l'Europe en particulier. Le gouvernement israélien, dans sa fuite en avant, n'y serait probablement pas opposé pour des questions de rapport de force stratégique. Nous devons tous veiller à ce que ça n'arrive pas, à ce que le pays tienne. Aussi parce que si nous voulons voir un jour un Iran où la démocratie soit une réalité, il faut qu'il y ait une société debout. Le groupe ALDE remercie les rapporteurs d'avoir porté cette résolution que nous voterons bien évidemment. Je vous remercie.
Sevele Celenc.
Thank you, Chair. Dear colleagues, first I would like to thank the rapporteur for this serious and very well prepared report. As the group of the Unified European Left, we support this report we support this report. At the same time, we would like to use the debate to highlight several urgent concerns regarding the situation in Iran and to suggest areas that need to be further strengthening. One important strength of the report is that it does not separate security issues from human rights concerns. However, for that very reason, it remains at a point where it needs to be addressed. While the report examines Iran's regime's regional actions and their impact on civilians, it says little about the consequences of Israeli and United States military operations against Iran for civilians. Civilian deaths, displacement, destruction of infrastructure, and the international law questions raised by these attacks should also be part of more comprehensive human rights assessment. This aspect is relatively absent from the report. Relatedly, we appreciate for its great attention to the Iranian government's use of the death penalty as a tool of repression, particularly in relation to political activists and oppositional groups. Yes, the sharp rise in executions in recent years raises serious concerns about the use of capital punishment to suppress dissent. I would like to say a few things on this matter as well. According to Iran Human Rights and ECPM, together against the death penalty, at least 1,639 people were executed in 2025, a shocking 6 times increase compared with 267 executions in 2020, and the highest number in the last decade. The UN has also reported that since the beginning of 2026, at least 40 people have been executed on national security charges, including 18 protesters. This repression falls largely on Kurdish people and Baluchis, as well as political activists, journalists, writers, and dissidents more broadly. Executions are being used not only for ordinary crimes, but also to silence opposition and intimidate entire communities. We must do everything in our power to put an end to these shameful executions, which stand a stain on our shared humanity. Thank you.
Tony Vaughan.
Yeah, first of all, I want to pay tribute to Mr. Paris. Thank you for sharing your experiences with us, and I want to commend your bravery and strength. And as I will come on to say, it must compel action by this Assembly and by this institution. The Socialists, Democrats and Greens welcome the resolution of Max Lux and the opinion and our group's amendments to it proposed by Azada Rojhan. It's imperative that we forcefully condemn the brutal repression of the protests that we have seen by the Iranian state since last December, a state which wholly lacks democratic legitimacy. I strongly support the proposal to call out this repression as potential crimes against humanity. When tens of thousands are killed, injured or arrested, and when torture, enforced disappearance and the widespread use of the death penalty are deployed as tools of political control, we are no longer talking about isolated incidents, but about a widespread and systematic attack on the civilian population. The opinion is also right to highlight Iran's destabilising effect beyond its borders, from support for terrorists to the export of drones and weapons which sustain Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine. And given Iran's growing tendency to detain foreign nationals on fake charges and then use them as leverage, I strongly support the amendments which are calling for a joint international strategy to combat this so-called hostage diplomacy, to secure hostages' immediate release, tabled by my UK colleague Alicia Cairns in the Legal Affairs Committee. Craig and Lindsay Foreman are 2 British tourists arrested in January last year in Iran, are 2 of these hostages. Travelling there on a global motorcycle tour, they were sentenced to 10 years in prison by the same Judge Salavicki to whom Mr. Paris referred, a judge who had been sanctioned by the EU, the UK and the United States. So-called confessions were produced after psychological pressure and inhumane treatment without access to a lawyer. They are wholly innocent, and they have been on hunger strike for over a month in protest at their treatment. Their case should be a wake-up call. Too often, states are picked off one by one. They face immense pressure to negotiate a loan for the release of their citizens. And so I call on the Council of Europe and Member States to adopt a more robust approach with a coherent and coordinated strategy so we can bring our citizens home and end hostage diplomacy for good. And to the Iranian people, we say this. The international community and the Council of Europe will not look away. We stand with you in your struggle for fundamental rights, and we must ensure that justice and accountability for these grave violations is secured wherever those victims are from.
Marie-Christine Dallot.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Mes chers collègues, malgré l'annonce récente d'un accord entre les États-Unis et l'Iran pour mettre fin au conflit, la situation iranienne demeure extrêmement préoccupante. Et le témoignage de M. Jacques Paris, poignant, parce que ce témoignage était poignant, nous l'atteste et nous le prouve. La fin des hostilités ne saurait faire oublier la répression qui se poursuit contre la population et tout particulièrement contre les femmes. Pendant cette période de guerre, le régime iranien a continué de recourir à des arrestations arbitraires, à des procédures expéditives et à des exécutions à motivation politique. Il faut aussi parler des tortures physiques qui sont infligées sans fondement, hormis des soupçons, des rumeurs. C'est une atteinte directe au principe de l'état de droit, le droit à un procès équitable, l'indépendance de la justice, l'égalité devant la loi et la protection de la dignité humaine. La situation des femmes iraniennes est l'un des symptômes les plus visibles. Selon le Forum économique mondial, en 2025, l'Iran se classe 145e pays sur 148 en matière d'égalité entre les femmes et les hommes. Le combat des femmes iraniennes a pris une dimension mondiale après la mort en détention de Mahsa Amini en septembre 2022. Son nom est devenu le symbole d'une aspiration universelle à la liberté et à la dignité. Le mouvement Femmes, Vie, Liberté a permis d'éveiller les consciences et de faire entendre, bien au-delà des frontières iraniennes, la voix de celles qui réclament le respect de leurs droits fondamentaux. L'Iran doit s'engager résolument sur la voie d'une égalité réelle entre les femmes et les hommes. Cela suppose de garantir aux femmes la liberté de choisir leur tenue vestimentaire, mais aussi l'égalité dans l'accès à l'emploi, à la vie publique, à la justice et aux responsabilités. L'avenir démocratique de l'Iran est indissociable de la pleine et entière reconnaissance des droits des femmes. Il repose également sur le respect des libertés fondamentales de l'ensemble de la population, sur l'égalité devant la loi et sur l'existence d'institutions garantes de l'état de droit. Aujourd'hui, nous pouvons tous constater que ces conditions ne sont pas réunies. Le Conseil de l'Europe s'est toujours attaché à défendre la dignité humaine, la démocratie, les libertés fondamentales. En conséquence, nous devons continuer à soutenir celles et ceux qui, en Iran, œuvrent pacifiquement pour davantage de liberté, d'égalité et de justice. Aussi, le groupe PPE soutient cette résolution avec conviction. Je vous remercie.
Markus Wiechel.
Mr. President, on behalf of the group of the European Conservatives, Patriots and Affiliates, I rise in firm support of this resolution, a resolution that refuses to look away from central truth. The Islamic Republic is an illegitimate, blood-soaked dictatorship that has forfeited every claim to sovereignty over the Iranian people. Since the nationwide protests erupted in late December last year, this regime has waged war on its own citizens with a savagery that shocks the conscience. Live ammunition fired into crowds, mass arrests, systematic torture, gender-based violence, and a death penalty applied on an industrial scale, including sham trials and the execution of political prisoners. We may not know the precise death toll, but we do know this. More than 50,000 Iranians did not sacrifice their lives on the streets in Iran just to get a nuclear deal, a ceasefire, or for any diplomatic formula that leaves the mullahs in power. These brave men and women, students, workers, and elders alike, rose to freedom, dignity, and the right to determine their own future. They were met with bullets. So, colleagues, this is not a normal state. This is a regime that exports terrorism through its proxies, supplies drones and missiles to Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. It conducts transnational repression on European soil, including intimidation, threats, surveillance, and even assassinations. In September last year, there was an assassination attempt by the proxies of the Islamic Republic against a friend of mine, the researcher and Iran expert Arvin Khoshnood. He luckily survived, but must live hidden since. And this morning, the Swedish Security Service warned the public that the Islamic Republic continues to recruit young people linked to criminal gangs for attacks on Swedish territory. The safety of European cities are directly threatened by this regime and their hybrid warfare. We must therefore reject any approach that treats human rights as a secondary concern to be bargained away. The Iranian people have made their choice very clear, at immense cost. So, colleagues, the Council of Europe was founded to defend human dignity against tyranny. The Iranian people are fighting that same fight today. They deserve more than sympathy. They deserve our solidarity, our protection, and a clear European policy that treats the Islamic Republic for exactly what it is, an enemy of freedom, while standing explicitly with those who risk everything to be free. Thank you.
Piero Fassino.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll speak Italian. Il mondo ha salutato con soddisfazione il memorandum tra Stati Uniti e Iran e nelle stesse ore a Teheran si continuava a impiccare. In questa contraddizione, io credo, sta il dramma che sta vivendo il popolo iraniano. Alla fine di questa guerra l'Iran esce più forte. Abbiamo consegnato all'Iran un potere di interdizione che sta già facendo valere sulla navigazione dello Stretto di Hormuz. Il memorandum prevede risarcimenti, lo sblocco all'Iran, lo sblocco delle esportazioni del petrolio e altre risorse finanziarie. Sarebbe come se si fosse fatto un piano Marshall per la Germania lasciando i nazisti al potere. Io credo che noi abbiamo bisogno di stigmatizzare tutto questo, perché non può valere la regola per cui il prezzo di un gallone di benzina vale più della vita dei ragazzi di Teheran. E questo è tanto più grave perché Trump, che ha messo in essere questa guerra, ha avuto anche il buon gusto di dichiarare qualche giorno fa di non aver mai pensato a un regime change, cioè in altri termini, purché Hormuz sia navigabile, purché il gas e il petrolio arrivi, può succedere qualsiasi cosa a Teheran, possono continuare a impiccare come stanno facendo ancora in questi giorni. Si può capire lo sconforto, l'angoscia di chi si è battuto in questi anni contro il regime, di chi, a partire dalle ragazze e dai ragazzi di Teheran, è sceso in piazza per la propria libertà e ha pagato con un prezzo drammatico di repressione nel sangue il proprio coraggio. Io credo che noi abbiamo il dovere di denunciare tutto questo e soprattutto di non lasciare soli i ragazzi di Teheran e di continuare a essere al loro fianco nella loro battaglia per la libertà.
Boriana Apeg. Your microphone is off, I'm afraid. Let's try again.
I think. Mr. President, dear colleagues, tyranny is an endless, boundless malevolence which for a long time has cast its grim shadow over millions of displaced human beings. Tyranny turns life into death, blessing into lament, and comfort into torment. Tyranny oppresses humanity, free will, and human dignity. Tyranny is the other side of the coin of war. Those are the words of Narges Mohammadi from her Nobel Prize acceptance speech, a speech she couldn't deliver in person because she was in prison. Narges Mohammadi is still in prison today, her health failing after 5 years behind cold walls, punished simply for defending women's rights not to be forced to wear hijab, punished for fighting for equality, punished for supporting the woman life freedom movement, a movement brutally crushed, shattered, just like the protests in December when courageous young people filled the streets only to be met with bullets, executions, and total disregard of human lives and human rights. Iran's Islamist regime is not just ruling its people, it's waging war against them, a war against everything we, the Council of Europe, hold sacred: democracy, equality, and human rights. We must stand with the Iranian people in their struggle for freedom. We must keep raising our voices and condemning the regime. The Iranian people deserve so much more. They deserve freedom. They deserve justice. The regime's tyranny must come to an end. Thank you.
Sir Edward Lee.
Mr. President, we've had a most powerful debate so far, and a very moving one, starting with the personal testimony of Mr. Jacques Paris and the appalling treatment that he has received from this regime, an entirely innocent man. And I think we're united in this chamber. For instance, I congratulate my socialist colleague Tony Vaughan from the British Labour Party, who gave a most powerful speech, and my colleague Mr. Marcus Weigel from Sweden. We're all completely united in defending human rights. And I want to underline in this debate the tragic case of Lindsay and Craig Foreman. These are entirely innocent, quite elderly British people on a motorcycle trip through Iran who are being kept in the most appalling treatment, and they are now on hunger strike. Now, of course, we can express our own opinions about this war. I personally opposed it from the start for the very practical reason that I'm not sure you can ever change regimes from the sky. But we have to be realistic. We cannot allow Iran to get a nuclear weapon. We cannot allow this appalling behavior, terrorist behavior. So I'm not sure that constantly criticizing our American allies is necessarily the right course. We should be a friend, and we should be prepared to give them our opinion. But one thing we can do in this assembly, it may be above our pay grade, maybe the Iranians don't care about what we say, but we can speak out again and again on particular cases. And therefore I mention again Lindsay and Craig Foreman. Release them now. These are innocent people. They are suffering, and let this be the cry that comes up united from this chamber.
Manuela Pertegela.
Chair, colleagues, we are all horrified by this violent situation in Iran, where we witnessed horrific repression of protests, arbitrary detentions, torture, the killing of civilians, hostage-taking, alongside digital and landline blackouts designed to silence the voices of ordinary people by the cowardly Iranian regime. We must demand the release of all those who have been arrested for protesting and a stop to the horrifying executions. We must stand firmly with Iranian people, risking their lives to demand dignity, justice, and basic freedoms. The broader regional context remains dangerously volatile. The recent conflict between the US, Israel, and Iran was utterly reckless, bringing the region to the brink of all-out war. Escalation benefits no one but extremists. It is imperative that all sides return to diplomacy and de-escalation. The international community must work together to hold the Iranian regime accountable for its crackdown on its own people. Iran needs to end its banditry in the Strait of Hormuz, including stopping support for armed groups and interference with international shipping. We must also prepare to protect our citizens and uphold security at home, including addressing threats posed by agents operating beyond Iran's borders. Finally, we must implement sanctions against all members of the Iranian authorities involved in the imprisonment, execution, and transnational repressions of citizens. Thank you.
Fabian Molina.
Thank you, Chair. Colleagues, let me begin with an uncomfortable truth. The illegal war of aggression waged by the United States and Israel against Iran has not weakened the regime. It has strengthened it. Military attacks have allowed the ruling elite to rally nationalist sentiment, tighten their grip on power, and justify even harsher repression. This is a painful reminder that conflicts must be resolved peacefully and within the framework of international law. And yet, despite everything, the Iranian people continue to resist. Since December 2025, thousands, millions have taken the streets. Women, students, workers, and members of ethnic and religious minorities. They are demanding dignity, freedom, and an end to the decades of discrimination and violence. The regime's response has been brutal. Tens of thousands killed, including children, mass arbitrary detention, enforced disappearances, and a communications blackout to hide these crimes from the world. This resolution, to which I congratulate the rapporteur, calls for accountability through the International Criminal Court, through targeted sanctions, and through the extensions of the UN fact-finding mission. Until yesterday, high-level negotiations between Iran and the United States took place in my home country, Switzerland. We are proud to facilitate dialogue. But let me be clear, even if a deal is reached, the human rights crisis remains unresolved. Dialogue without accountability is appeasement. The people of Iran deserve more than diplomatic progress on nuclear issues. They deserve action on their fundamental rights. I urge this Assembly to adopt this resolution. Thank you.
Joseph O'Reilly.
Thank you, President. Congratulations to our rapporteurs. The main conclusion of the report before us is that there is a clear abuse and non-existence of law, rights, and in Iran, and that this is manifested in mass arrests of protesters, detention without trial, abuse, torture, and extensive use of the death penalty. This systematic suspension of human rights is wrong. The report correctly recommends that our government should be proactive, as must our Council of Europe through PACE and the Committee of Ministers on this. We should be active in any other international organisations which our states are involved in. Crucially, the current peace negotiations should include a focus on human rights. The gentle, sophisticated people of Iran must decide their own destiny. We all want to see a democratic, secular republic in Iran. The best existing blueprint for this at this point in time is that of Mrs. Rajivi of the National Council for Resistance in Iran. Minority religions, including Christians, are particular targets, so too are LGBT persons. Iran has been exporting terror to Ukraine, to Lebanon, to Israel, and to Yemen. I say well done to Mr. Paris, and I join with our UK colleagues in calling for the release of the two innocent citizens held just as they went through on a motorbike holiday through Iran, which is the right of any persons, and it's a horror that they're in detention, and I think a clear call for the release should go out from today. Thank you, President.
Maria Mezentseva-Fedorenko.
Thank you, dear President. Thank you, dear Rapporteur. Thank you, colleagues. Today it traces me back in the memory when I was a co-rapporteur on women's rights in Iran and the protection of the women's rights. But today, colleagues, we're talking about a very wide, larger, and definitely broader context of the authoritarian regime in Iran, its erosion, and security and defense in Europe. Not only to say the fact that we're talking about multiple and grave human rights violations that occurred not only since 2025 protests when they were oppressed and the universal human right for peaceful protest was oppressed, but even today when dozens, hundreds, we don't even know the exact numbers, are kept as hostages. Well, the same what is another aggressor, a partner of Iran in Europe, Russia, even though it's not actually the real Europe, but only a small part of its geography, supporting Iran with training, with co-production of drones, and sending them, colleagues, please listen, not only on Ukraine, on the western part of it, but directly targeting and co-targeting parts of your states belonging to NATO and EU. That's put a great question. How do we collide today to oppose these grave violations of security, defense, human rights, and democracy? Let's not forget that Madame Narges Mohammadi, she's the Nobel laureate, is still under the need of medical care, and she needs to be released. And so many names have to be also outlined. I just want to thank the rapporteurs and to increase the attention to this report so we can all support it, and to say today that we have to defeat the regime altogether. Thank you.
Alexei Goncharenko.
It's like speaking, it's already done.
Dear colleagues, it's an extremely important report, and I want to thank Rapporteur, and we definitely all need to support this report because we made one big mistake. Not one, but several times. We tried to coexist with the regimes which already decided that we should not exist at all. I speak about Iran, I speak about Russia, and we all the time try to coexist with them. It doesn't work. Iranian regime should be destroyed as well as Russian regime. Because that is the only way to have security in Europe, that is the only way to have security in the world. I hear criticism of Israel. Dear friends, it's not Israeli drones which are flying in our skies. It's Iranian drones which are flying in our skies and killing us in the member states of Council of Europe. Not just Ukraine, but Romania, Poland. What we are waiting for, that their nuclear weapons will attack us. So, we need to do everything we can to destroy this regime. And Iranian people is not an obstacle in this. Iranian people is our resource to end this regime. Because in reality, Iran is occupied by Islamic Republic. And we all need to do what we can do. Severe diplomatic relationships with this occupational regime of Iran. We need to call spades the spades. IGRC to call them terrorists. Many countries, member states of Council of Europe, still did not do this and continue to have relationships with Iran. We can't do this. We need to keep Hormuz Strait open. We can't be hostages of this awful regime. This regime should be ended. There are some regimes which shouldn't be understood. They just should be ended. Thank you.
Estrella.
Mr. President, dear colleagues, first I congratulate the rapporteur, Max Lux, on this timely report that calls for solidarity with the Iranian people, not for war, not for policies that risk making their situation even more precarious. The Iranian people have repeatedly demonstrated their desire for greater freedom, dignity, and democratic participation. So, the crucial message is that democracy can't be imposed through war. It should be supported by civil society, human rights defenders, independent journalism, and the rule of law. As the military aggression strengthens democracy forces within Iran, the answer is no. As it improves the protection of human rights, of course not. Dear colleagues, as parliamentarians, we should remain firm in condemning human rights violations wherever they occur. And we have an obligation to condemn this tragic war that caused thousands of victims, many of them women and children, just because Trump and Netanyahu do not respect international law and have decided to attack a sovereign country. History will not judge this conflict by the intentions proclaimed at its outset. It will judge it by its consequences. And the consequences of this attack are devastating for everyone, for opponents of the Iranian regime, for the stability of the region, and for the world economy. And we don't want to be judged as accomplices. Thank you very much.
Andreas Minich.
Sehr geehrter Herr Präsident, geschätzte Kolleginnen und Kollegen! Heute sprechen wir über die Verbrechen der Islamic Republic, einem Regime, das unmenschlicher nicht sein kann. Wir haben von Jacques Paris gehört, die furchtbaren Zustände von Europäern, die als Geiseln genommen worden sind. Ein System der Geiseldiplomatie, die als bewusstes System von der Islamic Republic gegenüber Europa ausgeübt wird. Viele Europäer, Deutsche, Belgier, Österreicher, Kamran Gaderi zum Beispiel, ein Österreicher, der über 7,5 Jahre im Foltergefängnis Evin verbringen musste, unter schrecklichsten Bedingungen, und sogar EU-Diplomaten, die vom langen Arm der Islamic Republic hier in der Geiseldiplomatie gegen Europa eingesetzt werden. Das muss auf das Strengste verurteilt werden. Es müssen Lindsay und Craig Foreman unbedingt freigelassen werden, sowie alle politischen Gefangenen. Im Islamic Republic Regime kann es nicht sein, dass über 2000 Hinrichtungen stattfinden. Am 8. und 9. Januar haben wir alle auf das Allerschrecklichste sehen müssen, wie über 40.000 Menschen auf das Brutalste einfach in den Straßen erschossen worden sind, nur weil sie nach Freiheit gerufen haben. Dieses Regime hat jede Legalität verloren. Wir müssen eine gemeinsame Strategie hier im Europarat finden, um der Islamic Republic unter Druck zu setzen, um die Menschen im Iran solidarisch unterstützen zu können und dass die Menschen nicht mehr gefoltert werden und freigelassen werden. Das ist, glaube ich, das Ziel, das wir hier verfolgen müssen. Vielen Dank.
Louise Morel. No. Dimitrios Mansos.
Thank you, Chair. The systematic violation of fundamental human rights in Iran is an undeniable reality. Restrictions on democratic participation, the suppression of women's rights, the persecution of political opponents, torture and summary executions all form the face of a violent authoritarian regime which also acts as a serious source of instability across the region. These are well-established facts. The question, however, is what should the rest of the world do to support the citizens of Iran who took to the streets only a few months ago to demand a better future? And the reply cannot be to bomb their country. Geography and history of the region teach us that democratic transition has never been achieved through external military intervention, but rather through persistent efforts to raise international awareness, strengthen institutions, empower civil society. Nearly 4 months since the beginning of the latest US-Israel military operations, it has become clear that these lacked clear objectives or exit strategies, nor were they genuinely aimed at protecting the people of Iran from an authoritarian regime. In contrast, they seem to have increased its strength and resilience. After all, supporting Iranian citizens has nothing to do with the management and exploitation of energy resources, with maritime routes that open and close according to geopolitical interests, with nuclear arms that should be under effective monitoring for years now. The only sustainable solution lies, first, in a mutually binding peace agreement, and second, in a more robust framework for the implementation of international law and the protection of all individuals in danger. Only in this way can we honestly support the citizens of Iran in their struggle for democracy, freedom and fundamental rights, not by violence, but by inspiring and securing change. Thank you.
Mike Reeder.
Mr. President, what more can I add to this in the 2 minutes that I've got available? Some phenomenal speeches by colleagues. I'd like to call out particularly my colleague Tony Vaughan for his opening remarks and for the work of my good friend Alicia Kearns on bringing forward the amendments to support European citizens and dual nationality citizens and being released and not being used as essentially negotiation tools by the Iranian government. But look, when you read through these reports, it brings home the seriousness that we all recognise, that we would have seen in the news, we would have had briefings as parliamentarians, but still some of the actions that were unveiled through the work of the rapporteurs still turns my stomach. The abuses, the detention, the torture, the executions, the censorship is something that should not be happening in this day and age. And I thank the rapporteurs for shedding a light on this and adding the Council of Europe's work to the growing work of the international community and calling out the murderous Ayatollah regime. I particularly welcome the proposals to recognise the actions of the regime under international humanitarian law, and I hope that we can do more to call the regime to justice through the international courts. But in the UK, we have been taking action to move forward the agenda on this, and whilst I support my government's work on the public threats bill that passed through Parliament's first stages last week, there is still more our government can do to strengthen sanctions against those who are responsible for human rights abuses, to support independent Iranian journalists and civil society, to protect Iranian members of the Iranian diaspora from intimidation and harassment, and work with our allies to release those hostages that I mentioned earlier. Just this weekend, actually, Mr. President, I was at the Collingtree Park Village Fete. An Iranian couple came to speak to me about the challenges they're facing and getting their mother to come visit them in the UK. There is still some stigmatism in the Home Office over the treatment of Iranians who have fled the country and have made their lives in the UK and are doing the right thing in our country and making sure they're committing. But I fully support this report. I thank the rapporteur for the work they have done, and I look forward to voting and supporting it later on today.
Armayan Kandan.
Distinguished members, there can be no doubt that the protection of human rights, fundamental freedoms, and democratic participation must remain at the heart of our engagement with the situation in Iran. The Iranian people should have the right to determine their own future, free from repression, fear, and violence. Empowering those who advocate human rights, democratic participation, and the rule of law is not only an act of solidarity, but also a contribution in long-term regional stability. In this regard, the Council of Europe can play a valuable role by providing platforms for dialogue and exchange. However, the future of Iran must ultimately be determined by the Iranian people themselves. At the same time, any discussion on Iran must also take account of the broader regional context. The recent conflict involving Iran, Israel, and the United States has further destabilized an already fragile region. For those of us in the Eastern Mediterranean, these developments are not abstract. The recent drone incident affecting Cyprus serves as a reminder that regional conflicts can quickly spill over and directly affect our region. Situated at the crossroads of Europe and the Middle East, Cyprus is particularly exposed to the consequences of regional instability. Distinguished members, the Council of Europe should continue to support diplomacy, de-escalation, and dialogue. This applies not only to the wider Middle East, but also to unresolved issues in the Eastern Mediterranean, including the Cyprus issue. Thank you.
Azadeh Rojan.
No. Dear colleagues, dear Mr. Paris, thank you to the rapporteur for this very important report. I was actually born in Iran, and I was 5 years old when I moved to Sweden together with my parents. They left Iran because they wanted their daughter to grow up in freedom and in dignity. And what my parents wanted for me in life is what millions of people inside of Iran still are demanding after 45 years. They want the right to live without fear. But the truth is that the Iranian regime, the Islamic regime of Iran, they don't know anything else than ruling by fear. In 2 days, they killed 30,000 of their own people. 30,000 people were killed in 2 days. Why? Because they demanded change. They wanted to live in democracy. If we are not afraid of Iran after what they did in these 2 days, then I don't think the world knows what they are up against. Next to Russia and North Korea, the Iranian regime, the Islamic regime of Iran, is the most dangerous regime in the world. Enough is enough. We can't continue just saying that we stand by the people of Iran. We also need to show in action that we really believe in their rights to live freely and in democracy and with human rights. That puts a real pressure on all of us to keep on pushing our own countries and to show that we really stand with the people of Iran. Thank you.
Alicia Kearns.
Congratulate Herr Lux on his report. It is also a pleasure to speak after the Honourable Lady, who speaks so well on behalf of the Iranian diaspora. We are here to discuss the rule of law in Iran, so let me speak of a terrorist regime that has made its absence a foreign policy. Iran takes innocent people and trades them. I speak, of course, of hostage-taking. And it works because we let it. Right now, Craig and Lindsay Foreman sit in an Iranian prison. They are not spies, but Iran says they are and has jailed them for 10 years. Lindsay was interrogated for 30 days. Craig was tortured. That is not a justice system, it is a ransom note. The UN's own experts say that they are arbitrarily detained. And so I must turn here to my own government, because I will not ask of others what I will then excuse at home. The UK government calls them innocent tourists, innocent without question, but the word is a comfort, not a policy. It refuses currently to call them arbitrarily detained, it refuses to call them hostages, and it has made Tehran pay no price at all so far. France has named its citizens arbitrarily detained. So did Australia. Why fear the truth more than our friends? And I call on the UK government to act like the French did and refer the Foreman's detention to the International Court of Justice. Hostage-taking pays because we face it alone. Every quiet deal done by one of our countries tells the regime that our people have a price. 46 nations sit here. If one of us is robbed a citizen, we should all answer together, and we must make sure there is a cost that the hostage taker feels. Because Craig and Lindsay have lost more than 500 days to a regime, because we will not stand together, because we are too interested in the personal political gain that we can make from getting our own person home, rather than standing firm together. The regime is committing crimes against humanity not only against their own people, but against our own, and we must finally act in an Article 5-style deterrent where we stand together against the Iranian regime.
Damien Cotier.
Merci, Monsieur le Président de séance. Nombreux sont les collègues, et le rapporteur l'a fait aussi, qui ont rappelé la répression terrible qu'il y a eu ces derniers mois et ces dernières années en Iran, avec un nombre considérable de victimes qui fait véritablement froid dans le dos. Et comme d'autres, j'aimerais remercier M. Jacques Paris pour son témoignage, qui nous permet d'avoir directement ici les propos, les paroles de quelqu'un qui a souffert de manière atroce et qui ne devrait tout simplement pas exister des comportements de ce régime. Ce que le rapport a l'avantage aussi de souligner, c'est la menace transnationale qui émane de ce régime, et au fond le fait qu'il ne s'agit pas ici simplement d'exprimer notre solidarité ou notre désapprobation dans les mots les plus forts possibles, mais aussi le fait que nous avons un risque immédiat dans nos pays, sur notre continent, par l'attitude de ce régime qui utilise non seulement l'intimidation, mais la violence, l'enlèvement, voire les assassinats aussi sur le sol européen. On pourrait se demander pourquoi le Conseil de l'Europe s'intéresse à cette région du monde qui est en dehors de son territoire, mais en réalité ce lien ici il est direct. Cela étant, j'aimerais tout de même modérer un peu les propos de celles et ceux qui ont dit qu'il faut maintenant couper la diplomatie. Chers collègues, on a vu que la force ne permettait pas de résoudre cette situation, et je crois que les Américains ont raison de reprendre langue avec le régime iranien, comme l'ont fait les Européens de manière appuyée il y a une dizaine d'années en négociant un accord JCPOA, qui s'est négocié en partie d'ailleurs dans mon pays, et vers lequel probablement on se dirige à nouveau parce que les éléments de la discussion sont aujourd'hui les mêmes. En tout cas, mon pays, la Suisse, reste à disposition pour des entretiens diplomatiques. Bien sûr que nous souhaitons tous voir ce régime disparaître, mais lorsqu'on discute d'un accord de paix, c'est évidemment avec des personnes avec qui on est en désaccord que l'on discute. C'est à ça que sert la diplomatie, et elle nous permettra aussi d'avancer. Donc il faut prendre des mesures qui sont fortes et pas seulement des mots, et le rapport le propose, et je remercie le rapporteur et je les soutiens, mais il faut aussi entrer en discussion car nous devons sortir de cette crise. Je vous remercie.
Sibyl Arslan.
Sehr geehrter Herr Vorsitzender, geschätzte Kolleginnen und Kollegen, ich danke dem Berichterstatter für seine wertvolle Arbeit und für diesen exzellenten Bericht. Dieser Bericht von Max Lux zeigt deutlich, dass Menschenrechte, Demokratie und Rechtsstaatlichkeit im Iran weiterhin massiv unter Druck stehen. Berichte über Gewalt gegen Demonstrierende, politische Verfolgung, willkürliche Verhaftungen und die Anwendung der Todesstrafe erfüllen uns mit großer Sorge. Mein Dank gilt auch Ihnen, Herr Paris, für Ihre Ausführungen. Bitte nehmen Sie unsere Solidarität mit all den Menschen im Iran mit. Der Bericht würdigt den Mut der iranischen Bevölkerung, insbesondere von Frauen, Menschenrechtsverteidigerinnen, Journalisten und Journalistinnen sowie all jene, die trotz großer Risiken für Freiheit, Würde und demokratische Rechte eintreten. Wir stehen an der Seite der Iranerinnen und Iraner, die für ihre Grundrechte und das Recht kämpfen, ihre Zukunft selbst zu bestimmen. Deshalb unterstütze ich auch die Forderungen nach der Freilassung politischer Gefangener, insbesondere einem Ende der Repressionen und einer stärkeren Unterstützung der Zivilgesellschaft. Ich begrüße die ersten Gespräche zwischen den USA und dem Iran in der Schweiz. Das wurde vorher auch gesagt. Das ist wichtig, doch wir dürfen uns nicht von diesen Gesprächen auch täuschen lassen. Besonders besorgniserregend sind die wiederholten und lange Internetsperren, von denen wir eben auch sprechen müssen. Menschen wurden von Informationen abgeschnitten, Familien, insbesondere im Exil, konnten ihre Angehörigen nicht erreichen und die Bevölkerung wird dadurch isoliert. Diese neue Form digitaler Repression müssen wir klar verurteilen. Der Bericht sendet ein wichtiges Signal der Solidarität und Hoffnung und deshalb möchte ich mich nochmals ganz herzlich bedanken.
Thank you. Before I call the next speaker, could I inform colleagues that I do intend to call all speakers? I think we have enough time for that. The next speaker is Baroness Shami Chakrabarti.
Friends, there are few greater sins against human rights and international humanitarian law than the instrumentalization of human beings, especially civilians. There is much to condemn in the oppression of the Iranian people by their rulers. The regime also engages in transnational repression and rewards outsiders with the curiosity to visit its territory with arbitrary detention. So I too raised the case of Lindsay and Craig Foreman, held hostage by the regime for nearly 18 months. A carpenter and a psychologist, innocent tourists crossing the world by motorcycle with the appropriate travel documents when they were kidnapped in Iran in January 2025. They've been subject to inhuman and degrading treatment, solitary confinement, food, communication and consular support deprivation, interrogation whilst blindfolded. Sentenced to 10 years in prison on trumped-up charges of espionage, they weren't even allowed to make a defence in a procedure lasting less than 3 hours. They've been on hunger strike for 37 and 46 days. So much to condemn. But I'm here to plead for their release and repatriation to their family, their 4 children in the UK. Iran can have its beefs with other states. I beg it not to punish innocence, and perhaps even to reconnect with its more humane ancient traditions. To quote the Persian poet Hafiz, "Even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, 'You owe me.' Look what happens with a love like that. It lights the whole sky."
Carla Moonen.
Dear colleagues, first I would like to thank Mark Lux and Pablo Hespan, and especially thanks for Jacques Paris for sharing your personal experience as a prisoner in Iran. I will never forget your story. The report highlights that executions are rising. In 2024, more than 900 executions were recorded in Iran. The report also shows documents that the extensive use of revolutionary courts, where political cases are routinely handled behind closed doors, and the death penalty is used as a tool of fear. But despite that repression, people continue to speak up. We have seen that courage in the Women, Life, Freedom movement, a movement led by women and embraced by an entire generation, demanding freedom, dignity and democracy. And what was the response? Thousands of these brave protesters have been detained, including women, journalists and human rights defenders. And women and girls continue to face systematic discrimination and disproportionate repression simply for demanding equal rights. Dear colleagues, as stated in the call to action of these reports, we must ensure that voices for change in Iran are not silenced. Because here, together with our colleagues across Europe, we can help give a voice to those who cannot speak freely, to those imprisoned for protest, and to those fighting for a free future. That is our responsibility.
Martínez Quibras.
Mr. President, dear colleagues, the suffering of Iranian people must not be forgotten. Behind every statistic in this report, there is a human life, a father who never came home, a mother waiting for news about her child, a young person imprisoned simply for demanding freedom. This report describes mass repressions, arbitrary arrests, torture, and executions. People are being punished not for crimes, but for their courage to speak freely. But we should also be honest about a broader reality. The Iranian regime is not only oppressing its own people, it is also exporting instability far beyond its border. The same regime is that silences protesters at home, is supplying weapons to Russia. The same regime is that imprisons dissidents, is supporting extremist proxies across the Middle East. The same regime is that spreads the fear among its own citizens, is linked to hybrid threats that increasingly affect Europe. Human rights and security are not separate issues. When a regime has no respect for human dignity, sooner or later it becomes a threat beyond its own borders. Europe should not make the mistake of treating those crimes as Iranians' internal affair. Their consequences are already reaching Europe through instability, terrorism, hybrid threats, and support for Russia's aggression against Ukraine. We must stand with the people of Iran, not only because they deserve freedom, but because freedom, democracy, and human dignity are the strongest foundation of people and security. Prisons can silence a voice, executions can silence a person, but no regime has ever succeeded in silencing this desire for freedom. Thank you.
Lucia Pavakova. No. Tamila Tasheva.
Dear colleagues, when we speak about democracy and the rule of law in Iran, we must begin with a simple fact. Tyranny is afraid of truth. This year, the world has again seen brave Iranians in the streets, women, students, workers, ethnic and religious minorities protesting against repression, economic collapse, and the denial of basic freedom. Those protests did not appear from nowhere. Iranians protest in 2022 after the death of Mahsa Amini. They protested after the Revolutionary Guard shot down Ukrainian International Airlines flight. They protest against executions, censorship, and corruption. The regime response has been brutal and predictable. Internet shutdowns, mass arrests, torture, forced confession, and death sentences. Ukraine understands this very well. We know how dictatorship behave when they fear free people, how they use propaganda, courts, prisons, and violence to silence dissent. We see it in Russia, in occupied Crimea, and in Iran. The Iranian regime chose to become an accomplice of Russia's war against Ukraine. Iranian designs Shahed drones strike all our cities, civilians, hospitals, and energy infrastructure. Russia has used more than 50,000 Shahed-type drones against Ukraine during the full-scale war. So when we speak about human rights in Iran, we also speak about international security. A regime that imprisons its own people can also export terror beyond its borders. We must stand with the Iranian people. We need to keep attention on political prisoners, women, journalists, lawyers, and minorities. We need to demand an end to executions, tortures, and arbitrary arrests, and impose targeted sanctions against those responsibility. And we must support access to information. When regime shut down the internet, they create a space where crimes can happen. Ukraine now the price of silence. When the world does not react strongly enough, dictators learn they can go further. Thank you.
Dominik Oberhofer.
Sehr geehrter Herr Präsident, sehr geehrte Kolleginnen und Kollegen, aber vor allem lieber Max, also dein Beitrag, deine Arbeit haben hier eine Debatte heute ermöglicht, die zwingend notwendig war, weil wir einmal mehr zeigen, dass dieser Europarat das benennt, was in der Welt passiert und vor allem auch mit dem wir in Europa bedroht sind. Sehr geehrter Herr Paris, meine Kollegin hat das vorab schon ausgedrückt, auch ich werde Ihre Rede nie in meinem Leben vergessen. Dieses Zeugnis, das Sie uns mitgegeben haben in unsere politische Arbeit, das war eindrucksvoll, das war für mich auch unfassbar. Es war aber vor allem nicht ein Bekenntnis dazu, dass es um einen Konflikt, einen politischen Konflikt, einen abstrakten politischen Konflikt geht, sondern vielmehr, dass es um menschliche Schicksale hier im Iran geht. Viele von uns, und mir persönlich ist es nie gegangen, dass wir über politische Einschüchterung debattieren mussten bei uns im österreichischen Parlament. Und ich glaube, vielen von uns ist es zu Hause auch so gegangen, auch wenn die Debatten unter politischen Parteien oft sehr kritisch sind. Aber eingeschüchtert und mit Gewalt bedroht bin ich eigentlich nie geworden. Außer vor einigen Wochen, als ich wirklich das benannt habe, was hier im Iran passiert. Da habe ich massive Bedrohungen erlebt wie nie zuvor. Um mich mundtot zu machen, um mich einzuschüchtern. Und da frage ich mich ganz ehrlich, wenn es einem österreichischen Abgeordneten in Österreich, in Wien so geht, wie muss es der iranischen Diaspora in Europa gehen? Und das ist ein ganz großes Problem, das ich hier ansprechen will. Die Frauenaktivistinnen, die kritischen Regimegegner, die Iranerinnen und Iraner, die mutig auf die Straße gehen in Europa und demonstrieren, die sind bedroht. Die werden bedroht, die werden eingeschüchtert, die werden verfolgt von diesem Mullah-Regime. Und das zeigt uns, dass diese Diskussion hier in Europa angekommen ist und dass es so wichtig ist, dass wir heute hier aus dem Europarat ein klares Bekenntnis geben, nämlich der Solidarität für die Freiheit der Iranerinnen und Iraner. Danke für die Aufmerksamkeit.
Thank you, and that concludes the list of speakers. So I now call on Mr. Max Lux, the rapporteur, to reply. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, everyone, for contributing to this debate, and especially thank you, dear Mr. Paris. These were one of the most remarkable words I ever heard in my life, and I'm impressed by the energy you have after all what has happened. And I can promise you that after the debate you've heard, we take your energy with us. And we will try to create something good out of it for the people of Iran, to have a pathway to freedom, and also for our own citizens from our 46 member states. And I'm very thankful that our colleagues from the British Isles, if I am right, all underlined that Craig and Lindsay Foreman, they have to be freed, and I really want to underline that, and I think it's extremely important to understand these cases as common cases, and also really, and that is what I would like to highlight in the report, that we really need to have a common strategy to tackle this hostage diplomacy from the Iranian regime. It's even hard for Germany, France, and the United Kingdom to deal with this. Just imagine you're a smaller country in the neighborhood of Iran, like Armenia is, or something else. So that is why we really have to provide a common strategy and a common solution. Dear colleagues, I can't respond to every single speech that took place in this debate, but I had a wonderful feeling while this debate took place, because I think it showed a bit of who we are as this Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. We come from extreme different backgrounds, we come from extreme different nations, and we also, of course, have different stances on what we think about the current situation in the Middle East. But we are united when it comes to basic and fundamental human rights. And we are united to stand up for basic and fundamental human rights if they are so rough under attack in our neighborhood. And that is why I think this debate a bit showed today of who we are and what we can do. And let's take this energy that was spread from Mr. Perry's in this debate today with us, and let's take this energy to create really something better and to use our tools and our structure at the Council of Europe and at its Parliamentary Assembly to really create a space for the different democratic Iranian forces to think about their own future and to provide a pathway of hope and opportunities for their own future. I really thank you for this debate, and I look forward to continue to work together with all of you for freedom, democracy, and human rights in Iran and, of course, in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I ask if the chairperson of the committee wishes to speak? No, the chairperson.
Yes, thank you, President. Dear colleagues, on behalf of the Committee on Political Affairs and Democracy, I congratulate our rapporteur, Mr. Max Lux, on this report. This is his second report on human rights concerns related to Iran, and this continued attention is necessary. His work ensures that the plight of the Iranian people remains firmly on our agenda. It ensures that the Assembly raises its voice in favor of democracy, the right to demand change, and, importantly, to ensure that the voice of Iranians is heard when international attention focuses on the geopolitical tensions that have gripped the region. I also thank the rapporteur for opinion, Mr. Pablo Hispan, for the opinion of the Committee on Legal Affairs and Human Rights, which further strengthens the text in its calls for accountability for the crimes committed by the Iranian regime against its own people. Then, not least, I wish to express our profound gratitude to Mr. Jacques Paris for his testimony today. We often discuss hostage diplomacy in the language of international relations and statecraft, but his intervention reminds us of the human-level horror and the terror that lies at the heart of hostage diplomacy. Men and women deprived of their freedom, separated from their loved ones, used as instruments of political pressure. I applaud his bravery. I repeat in this hemicycle the names of those still imprisoned in Iran that he mentioned: Craig Foreman, Lindsay Foreman, Ahmadreza Jalali. We should commit to working for their release. The injustice they face, the years of their life unfairly stolen, demands our attention, solidarity, and resolve. Thank you, Mr. Paris. Dear colleagues, this report has a fundamental message. We must not allow geopolitical developments, however serious, to obscure the reality faced by millions of Iranians. The Assembly cannot determine Iran's future. The future belongs to the Iranian people alone. but we can be clear about the principles we defend: democracy, human rights, the rule of law, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, and the right of every citizen to participate peacefully in shaping the future of their country. I thank you all for your interventions today and encourage your support for the resolution.
Thank you. The debate then is now closed. We move on to the consideration of the amendments and, of course, eventually the resolution itself. The Committee on Political Affairs and Democracy has presented a draft resolution to which 12 amendments and 3 sub-amendments have been tabled. Now, they will be taken in the order in which they appear in the compendium. And could I remind you all that speeches on amendments are limited to 30 seconds. Now, I understand that the Chair of the Committee wishes to propose to the Assembly that amendments 3, 11, 7, 5 and 12 to the draft resolution, which were unanimously approved by the Committee, be declared as definitively approved. Is that so, Ms Gardiner? It is. If no one objects, I will consider the amendments to be approved. Is there an objection? I see no objection, so amendments 3, 11, 7, 5 and 12 to the draft resolution are therefore approved and will not be called. We move on into amendment number 2, and I call on Alexei Goncharenko to support amendment 2. You have 30 seconds.
Thank you, dear colleagues. I think this is a very important amendment. We just need to remind all of us that Iranian regime asymmetric warfare and their proxies, retaliatory actions, and all the malign activities of Iran is one of the main reasons, is the main reason why we are where we are. And we need to say this openly. We need to speak about this. We need to call this regime as a terroristic, as a regime which is a threat to all of us and to all values that we all share. Thank you.
Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment? I see nobody. What is the opinion of the committee?
In favour.
Thank you. I'll now put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. Okay. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. Amendment 2 is agreed. Let's turn now to Amendment 9 and the sub-amendment to Amendment 9. There is a sub-amendment proposed to Amendment 9. So I first call on Pablo Ispan, Rapporteur for Opinion, to support Amendment 9. You have 30 seconds.
Thank you, Chair. Just to quote specifically the brutal repression against women, political opposition, religious minorities, and LGTB community that are particularly in risk in Iran.
Thank you. I call on Max Lux, Rapporteur, to support the sub-amendment.
Thank you. I appreciate the amendment. And I just would propose to add also the aspect of ethnic minorities, because as we heard also in our debate, they are attacked a lot in Iran, and we should not forget them when we speak about minorities.
Let's deal with the sub-amendment first. Does anyone else wish to speak against the sub-amendment? There is no one. What is Mr. Ispan's opinion on the sub-amendment? Happy. The committee then is in favour of the sub-amendment. I shall now put the sub-amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. That sub-amendment is agreed. Now we come to the main amendment 9. Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment? No one indicates. What is the opinion of the committee?
In favour.
I'll now put Amendment 9 to the vote. The vote is open. Okay. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. That amendment is agreed. I move on now then to Amendment 10, and I call Mr. Pablo Ispan, Rapporteur for Opinion, to support Amendment 10. You have 30 seconds.
Thank you, Chair. It's just to remember that those crimes that the Iranian regime is committed could be and are under the international law and against humanity. So to build a legal framework against the Iran regime.
Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment? I see nobody. What is the opinion of the committee?
In favour.
Thank you. I'll now put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. Amendment 10 then is agreed. I now move on to Amendment number 6, and I call Azadeh Rojan to support Amendment 6. You have 30 seconds.
Can you hear me now? Yes. So, sorry, I don't have the amendment in front of me. So, which one? The Amendment 6 was the one.
It's Amendment number 6.
Yes, of course. So, sorry. So, we need more coordinated support for the civil society and I think it's about the civil societies in Iran. We need to see more support for those who carry out the voices of the democratic will of the Iranian people, something that we are unfortunately lacking today. Thank you. But why was it?
Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment? I see nobody. What is the opinion of the committee on the amendment?
In favour.
I'll now put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. That amendment, Amendment 6, is agreed. I now move on to Amendment number 8, and I call again. Give it time to go back to a seat. I call again on Azadeh Rojan to support Amendment 8.
And now I have the papers. So this is about, just to clarify this paragraph regarding the accelerating executions and death sentences against the protesters. And it's just about making this paragraph a little bit more clear on what's actually going on and the repression against the people. Thank you.
Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment? I see nobody. What is the opinion of the committee?
In favour.
I'll now put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. Amendment 8 then is agreed. I now move on to Amendment number 1 and the sub-amendment. I first call on Mr. Alexei Goncharenko to support Amendment 1. You have 30 seconds.
Amendment 1 is about Iranian-made drones which are attacking our skies, and not just Ukrainian skies, but for example, in October 2022, in my native city Odessa, I was witnessing the first attack of Iranian-made drones. But also now these drones are attacking and intruding to Romanian, Polish airspace. So we need to react on this. We need also, and this is in this amendment, to address that we need to have a common answer on this threat. Thank you.
I now call on Max Lux, rapporteur, to support the sub-amendment.
I thank Mr. Goncharenko for this important amendment because it highlights the security situation. But I think that it is not in our mandate as the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe to require a unified and decisive air defense response. And that is why I ask you to stay in our mandate and to please adopt this sub-amendment.
Does anyone wish to speak against the sub-amendment? Yes, of course you can express your opinion.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to express my opinion. I think it would be better to have these words because this is about the concrete reaction, because we don't need just to tell that there is a problem, but we need to find the solutions for this problem. But with all respect to the rapporteur and to the committee, I would agree with sub-amendment. Thank you.
I take it then the committee is in favour of the sub-amendment? Yes. Okay, I'll now put the sub-amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. The sub-amendment then is agreed. Now we come to the main amendment, Amendment 1, as amended. Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment as amended? I see nobody. What is the opinion of the committee?
In favour.
Thank you. I'll now put the amendment as amended to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. The amendment as amended, then, Amendment 1, is agreed. I now move on to Amendment 4 and the sub-amendment to Amendment 4. I first call on Alicia Kearns to support Amendment 4. You have 30 seconds.
I also apologise for failing earlier to congratulate my friend Pablo on this report as well, and I beg his forgiveness. Hostage-taking persists partly because we meet it alone, each state cutting its own deal. And my amendment seeks to end that, to align our responses and to oppose common costs. And Article 5, as I said before, for hostage-taking. Take one of us, you answer to all of us. And that is what I'm trying to achieve through this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. I call on Max Lux, rapporteur, to support the sub-amendment.
This is really a great amendment, and I'm so thankful that you proposed it. Thank you very much. I just would recommend to add this to paragraph 15.7 because it makes more sense in paragraph 15.7 as amended right now. And I use this opportunity to follow Alicia and thanking Pablo also as his great work as a rapporteur for opinion. Thank you, Pablo.
Does anyone wish to speak against the sub-amendment? I see nobody. Could I then ask Alicia Kearns for her opinion on the sub-amendment? Yeah. Content? Well, I'll just repeat. I know the mic was off. Alicia Kearns is content. I take it the committee is in favour of the sub-amendment. Thank you. I'll now put the sub-amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. The sub-amendment is agreed. I move now then to the main amendment 4 as amended. Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment as amended? Nobody has indicated. What is the opinion of the committee?
In favour.
I will now then put the amendment as amended to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. Amendment 4 as amended then is agreed. That brings us to the end of the amendments. We move on now then to proceed to vote on the draft resolution as amended. I remind colleagues that a simple majority is required. The vote is open.
Okay.
The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. The draft resolution as amended then is adopted. That brings us, colleagues, to the end of formal business. The Assembly will hold its next public sitting tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. with the agenda approved yesterday. The sitting is adjourned.
Thank you very much.